Yeah, boss.
Reinhold, is this the band?
Yeah, boss. It's a good band, too.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. Hey, Reinhold.
Yeah, boss?
Who's that drummer man?
That's the drummer man.
That's the drummer man?
That's the drummer man.
He give you any trouble?
Sometimes.
Well, you know the difference between a drummer and a puppy?
What is the difference?
The puppy will stop whining after a couple months.
Oh, man, that's cold.
Well, hey, I'm telling it like it is. Hey, Reinhold.
Yeah, boss?
Who that sax player?
That's Vic.
Is that Vic?
That's Vic.
You know how you can tell when you got a sax player at the door?
How can you tell?
Well, they can't find the key, then they never know when to come in.
Oh, man, that's rude. That's rude.
I just getting started now. Listen to that rhythm, bro. Hey, listen to that sound. Ooh, Lord. Woof. Hey, I see you got a trombone player in the band.
Oh, yeah.
You know the difference between a dead chicken in the road and a dead trombonist on the road?
No, I don't. Go ahead and tell me.
Well, you ain't gonna like this, but there's a remote chance that the chicken was on his way to a gig.
Ouch, ouch.
Hey, Rhino.
Boss?
You know what you call a baritone sax player without a boyfriend?
What do you call a baritone sax player without a boyfriend?
Homeless.
Oh, man.
Hey, Rhino.
Yeah, boss?
I see the bass player there. What do you call a bass player in a three-piece suit?
I don't know. What do you call it?
The defendant.
Hey, say, man, I've had about enough of you. I bet I know what you use for birth control.
Oh, yeah? What?
Your personality.
Oh, man, that's good. That's really good.
That's good.
Excuse me, I ain't got nothing to do with it, but I believe the fella, right?
A place to grow. special powers? The politicians. They're the ones who want special powers naturally, because they're in the power game. And what they can get from Ottawa, they will have more in Charlottetown, in Quebec City, in Victoria, BC. That's the game of politics, power.
Of hatred, politics and greed. But I know I wasn't alone when I cried on the day Johnny Cash died. Yes, I know.
I remember Parker, when he was governor a few years ago. He was in an interview in Calgary, and he made claim that the federal government is a de facto government, which means it's an unlawful and illegal government.
One who cared, a heart that big, well, that's...
I'm just a frostbitten Canadian boy here to thin the thickness of your skin. Every Saturday night, 9 o'clock, Politically Speaking with Duke Willis, Facebook's only live multicam talk show.
If this video
individuals can inspire, but it is the
doesn't kind of tighten the muscles in your throat, if this video doesn't make your lower lip quiver just a little bit, if it doesn't make your breath catch in your chest just a little bit, then you're a sad, cold-hearted motherfucker and I don't want to know you.
Add one more name from Ontario and carry me home down the highway of heroes, people above with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes, true patriot love, there was never more. No visions of glory, I serve without question, a personal gain, seek no justification, it's not part of my story, and it offers no comfort to the ones who remain. Just carry me home, down the highway of heroes, people above, but the flag's flying low. Took up my vocation, I was called by my nation, without hesitation, my answer I gave. Now I'm not wondering, the things that I might have been are no consolation in the forgotten rain. So carry me home, down the highway of heroes, people above, with the flags flying low. Carry me softly down the highway of heroes, true patriot love. Warriors and we stand on guard
Hi everybody, how you doing tonight? I hope you're ready to get your brain scrambled. Because first we're going to scramble it, then we're going to help you put it back together and figure this whole mess out. Or at least, part of the mess. I'm just going to go open up my Skype. Doug is on here already waiting for me to contact him, so give me just a second. And I will have Mr. Force here. Dun, da, da, da. Let's do that.
There you are.
Good day, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, for an old fat guy, I'm hanging in there. Had a good day out on the street today. Now let me just see if I can get this organized here. Ah, there you are. We'll enlarge that a little bit so people see things a bit bigger than a postage stamp. Bear with me, folks. I'll have Doug on your screen in just a second here. Oh, my stupid wireless keyboard is being a pain in the neck. There it goes.
You see me okay?
Yeah, it's a little bit blurry, Doug.
That must be all that alcohol we've been drinking.
You, not me. Okay, now that's got that way. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of blurry here, Doug.
Okay, hang on a minute. Let's see if I can fix that somehow.
Yeah, we're out of focus.
That's weird.
I feel like a Japanese tourist in Niagara Falls. Focus, damn it, focus!
Give me a second. Go. Oh, boy, am I ever out of focus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even with my glasses on, you're out of focus.
Yeah, let me see what's going on here. Silly cow.
You want to log out and try coming back in on Skype?
No, it's okay. Just give me a second here, then.
Oh, that's a bit better. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Now we got you nice and clear.
Yeah, I was mucking around with it earlier. And then
Ah, so it's all your fault.
it is.
To quote the Night Court show, bailiff, whack his peepee.
Here we go. Not the right gender.
You can't hear him. Hang on a second, guys. I forgot to click desktop audio. There we go. Now you should be able to hear Doug. Sorry about that.
Darn, they missed all that good banter.
Yeah, they missed all our comedy. There you go. That's all right. They're not paying for the comedy. They're paying to have their brains scrambled with information.
Okay, cool.
All right. Let me just pop this open on Facebook and make sure everything's... Oh, man. I have a cordless, like a wireless keyboard and mouse, and I think I need new batteries in my keyboard and mouse. I hit the keyboard and nothing happens. I move the mouse, nothing happens. Time for new batteries in my toys, I think.
That's not a good thing.
All right, there we go. So, how's Mr. Force today?
I'm doing okay. Been busy. We're shooting the 6 videos, the tutorial videos for The Myth is Canada. I've been busy writing the scripts for the videos. We've got 1 in the can. We're working to get the 2nd and the 3rd done this week, and then we'll go to the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th the week after. And then we should be ready for release probably last week of April, maybe a little bit sooner, depending upon how well we can get the edits done and lay the music in and the voiceover and all that other good stuff that goes with these. But so it's been keeping me very, very busy. I've been writing like crazy, up at 8 o'clock in the morning, back to bed at 2 in the morning, and writing
Well, I
and
know
researching
you're busy.
and rereading.
I know you're busy because you and I haven't had any 3 and 4 hour long phone calls this week.
Yeah, but we did have a very interesting call earlier this week, if you recall correctly.
Yeah, when my boss showed up and I was on the phone, that phone call?
No, I think it was the one in the evening.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
About stepping into the spotlight.
Well, why don't you fill people in on what you've been up to and what we're going to get into tonight? Because I'll let you tell them. I'll let you.
Okay.
You sort of threw this at me and said you won't believe. So, go ahead and tell people.
Well, what's really interesting too is I had a friend of mine call me from the West Coast today and tell me about a book that he's been reading, and I was able to go on the internet earlier today and download it off the internet, a PDF of the book. And why I'm bringing this up is because it fits beautifully into what we're going to talk about tonight. And the book was written by a lady. Hang on a second. I'm just got to flick over to her. Her name is Dr. Margaret McWilliams. Okay. And she was born in 1875 and she died in 1952. She lived too long. Let me put it to you that way. She was now she calls herself doctor. She was actually given a doctorate. You know, you get these honorary doctorates.
Yes.
Anyway, she believed that she became a doctor. She was also the Canadian Federation of University Women. She was head of that for a number of years. She was involved with various governments here in Ontario, the federal government, and the Winnipeg. She moved to Winnipeg with her husband at the time, and he became the lieutenant governor to Manitoba. And so she was really kind of one of these academics that was very, very pro what was going on in Canada at that time. And so she lived through all of this stuff that was going on. And so she wrote this book, and it's called The New Canada. And it's probably the largest piece of propaganda I've ever read. And I only had a brief time with the book. It's 375 pages long, but from page 1 to page 375 is nothing but a bunch of lies. And so I was skimming through it, and I thought, this would be interesting because this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And what she has to say. So what I'm going to do for the people that are watching tonight, if they're interested, I'm going to have Sean put this book up on the website under a new category we're going to have on the website called propaganda. So people can download it and see for themselves how well this was. I got to commend her on the way she's written this, because she's taken facts that are actually out there and then completely twisted them into lies that she's concocted in this book. And so she's very good at this. Are you still with me there, Duke?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just fighting with trouble on YouTube.
Okay.
YouTube is giving me grief on the feed here. It's shut down for some reason.
Oh, no. You wanted me to take a minute?
No, we're still live on Facebook, so...
Oh, okay. Well, we won't delay then. Nope. So I skimmed through the book, and I got to this chapter called "The Commonwealth Arrives." And so she wrote, for some years after World War II, Canada's position and that of other dominions was not understood by the world outside the British Empire. And then she, blah, 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 she goes on to say, the Declaration of 1917 had now to be developed into a formal arrangement which the world would understand. This was done at the Imperial Conference of 1926, when the now famous Declaration of Equity of Relationships of Britain and the Dominion was made. 5 years later, in 1931, the Statute of Westminster, passed by the British Parliament, put into legal form the principles of the Declaration in 1926. The Act embodied two main principles by which the new relationship was to be governed. Now, if you recall correctly, I sent you the Imperial Conference of 1926.
Yes.
It was called, I hope you downloaded it and read it.
I just sort of skimmed through it. I've had a busy day.
Yeah. Well, it was called the Resolutions from the Assembly number 2, Native Sons of Canada.
Yes.
This is what she is referring to. Now, if anybody has ever read this, and I thought it's kind of funny because what it says in here, okay, is talking about having a constitutional monarchy. And in order to do that, the Statute of Westminster would release the provinces to become sovereign, hold a constitutional convention to create a confederation document or a constitution for a federation or a federal government, and then bring back the monarch to Canada and add that into the mix under the Constitution, hence creating constitutional monarchy. And you can see in the first part of this document, it says sovereign status. And we go to the second paragraph, it says, our objective should be clear and unambiguous. An absolutely equal and independent sovereignty under the Crown of Canada, internationally communicated and internationally recognized. Hence, a constitutional monarchy. So what she's, and it's just beautiful how the way she puts this in her book. And then she quotes 7.1 and 7.2 of the Statute of Westminster. Now,
well,
if you
wait a minute, I've read section 7.1 and 7.2 and 7.3.
Correct.
Those don't call it a constitutional monarchy. Like that's.
No. What you see, the Statute of Westminster, okay, what she's saying the Statute of Westminster did was create a constitutional monarchy. What it actually did, and this is what I'm saying, she's taken this and taken the truth and then twisted it into this propaganda. Because most people who read this book, the original was put in 1948, the second one came out in 1952, revised. Because there's stuff later on in the book that talks about 1949 and what happened there, but she was already dead in there was stuff in the book that she passed away that they put in after she died. Anyways, coming back to what we're talking about here. So she says it's that the 7.1 and 7.2 allowed Canada, okay, the Dominion of Canada, to go ahead and create this relationship. Because she says the Imperial Conference, when the now famous Declaration of Equality of Relationship of Britain and the Dominion was made, 5 years later, that was passed through the Statute of Westminster. Now, she was correct in saying that the Dominion and Britain were on equal footing. Okay?
Yep.
But
basically, that's what Section 7, in a roundabout way, says, is that the independent colonies are no longer colonies of, they're independent, they're equal to.
In a nutshell, yes.
Yeah.
And then Section 11 says that they're no longer colonies. If they're not a colony, then what are they? They're a sovereign nation.
Bingo.
And so the Statute of Westminster actually allowed the provinces to confederate
if they
on their own footing, if they so chose. What she's saying is that the document just extended confederation that had already happened in 1867. The Act embodied two principles by which the new relationship was to be governed. No law of the British Parliament shall apply to any dominion unless the dominion wishes it to adopt it. And no law of any dominion shall be declared void on the ground that it is contrary to any law of the British Parliament. She says, now if you look at what 7.1 and 7.2 actually say.
I actually have them highlighted in the document, and I can bring them up for people to read if you want.
Go for it. So 7.1 actually says, nothing in this act shall be deemed to apply to the repeal, amendment, or alteration of the British North American Act 1867 to 1930, or any order, rule, or regulation made thereof.
Which section was that?
7-1.
7-1. Okay, folks, on the screen, you should be able to see the highlighted section that I've got here. What you're looking at is a copy of the the Statute of Westminster. The Westminster Act is what it's called before it becomes law. Once it's passed into law, it changes name and becomes the Statute of Westminster. Am I correct with that, Doug?
Yeah, when the British Parliament passed this in December of 1931, with the advice of council.
Well, it's just that people have heard me refer to the Westminster Act and the Statute of Westminster. They're the same thing. One's just in the process of being a law, and one has become the law. The statute is what it's called after. It's like here in Canada, we have a bill that becomes a law.
Correct.
Right? And it changes names. Back in the day in 1830s, or 1930s rather, they had acts which became statutes. And the Statute of Westminster is what you're looking at here on screen right now. And the three highlighted sections, the top one is the one that Doug's talking about. I hope you can read it on the screen.
Anyway, but she misquotes, okay, because in her book it says 7-1 and 7-2. What she's actually quoting, okay, is not 7-1 and 7-2. As I've said, you can read 7-1 and 7-2, and it's completely different from what she's quoting. And so she's misquoted by claiming 7-1 and 7-2. What she's actually quoting is Section 2, Section 2, number 2. Okay, and that actually says, so scroll up to section to number 2. You'll see 2-1 and then 2-2. No law and no provision of any law made after the commencement of this act by the Parliament of a Dominion shall be void or inoperative. Okay, you see that?
Yeah, I've got it highlighted for people, and my cursor is right underneath it.
Yeah, and so this is what she's quoting, but she's misquoting them as 7-1, 7-2. Now, what's interesting about that quote, and she says that the two limitations on the authority of Canada were kept by their own request. In them, there appears to be two of those ideological conditions which are characteristic that the British system and make it difficult for the non-British people to understand. Okay. So it's actually not that hard to understand. And I find it very interesting because Walter Kuhl does a beautiful job at explaining it. And that's the reason I brought this book on, because the way that she does this propaganda to make you think that the Dominion continued on after 1931 is the biggest pile of horse dung that one can flick at the sovereign people of the landmass known as Canada. Okay? You still with me?
I'm with you. She added fuel to the fire that was the lie started by William Lyon Mackenzie King.
That's true. So Walter Kuhl actually explains Section 2, Section 2.2 much better than I can. So let me just read what he had to say about it. He said, the Parliament of a Dominion in Section 2 does not refer to the legislative body sitting in Ottawa on December 10th, 1931.
10 days after the law was passed.
No, that's before the law was passed.
December 10th. Sorry, I thought you said January.
No. Let me try that again.
Okay.
The Parliament of a Dominion in Section 2 does not refer to the legislative body sitting in Ottawa on December the 10th, 1931. The legislative body sitting in Ottawa the day before the Statute of Westminster was passed, according to the Interpretations Act, 1889, Section 18, Paragraph 3, was the central legislative of a united colony. The central legislature of a united colony, whose only function and authority was to aid and advise the Governor General as the agent of the British government. Section 2 does not validate the central legislature of a united colony as the federal parliament or federal union, A federal union in Canada can be created only by completely independent and autonomous provinces, which Section 7.2 provides for. I'm pausing to let the people allow that to sink in.
Do you understand that, folks?
Okay,
Basically, he just came out and proved her to be a liar.
Well, not only that, but listen, I'm going to reread the last part of what he says here. Section 2 does not validate the central legislature of a united colony as the federal parliament of a federal union. A federal union in Canada can only be created by the completely independent and autonomous provinces, which Section 7.2 provides for.
Right. What he says is there's no union, but one can be created by the provinces once they are standing on their own.
They are standing on their own on December 11th.
Well, yes. It hasn't been realized by the people.
Yes.
Pardon me?
On December 12th, the central legislature of a united colony ceased to exist. Let that sink in for a moment. Because guess what they call the federal authority on December 12th, 1931?
What?
The central legislature of the United Colony. They said, because of 7-1, remember I sent you the Barr Smith interview?
Yes.
So if you go back to that, where Mr. Barr, he says, you are aware, of course, Mr. Smith, that under Section 7, subsection 1, the benefit of the Statute of Westminster insofar as the Dominion is concerned is withheld. This is the provisions of Section 2 in regard to the Colonial Laws Validity Act does not apply to the British North American Act. Consequently, the Dominion government cannot repeal or amend any portion of that act. Is it not fair to say, then, that insofar as the Dominion is concerned, the Statute of Westminster left us in exactly the same position as we were before, that is, insofar as the Dominion Parliament is concerned? Now, what's the Dominion Parliament? The central legislature of a united colony.
You can't have one without the other. If one's gone, the other's gone.
Okay. No. But he should have said, insofar as the legislature of the United Colony is concerned. He instead said Dominion Parliament, because he's basically saying that in December 12th, 1931, nothing changed. We're still the Dominion of Canada. Think about it. Why do you think Dr. Well, we'll just call her Margaret McWilliams, wrote this book? Why do you think she wrote it? She wrote it to propagandize the process of which the de facto decided to continue to move forward without telling the people what really happened. They decided to move forward, as Mr. Barr said. It didn't change anything. We're still the Dominion.
But I've read that the Barr Smith, and that's not what Smith agrees to.
No. I haven't gotten there yet. I'm just talking about what Barr said.
Like people, I have these documents, by the way. If anybody wants them, I can email them to you as PDFs, and you can read it yourself. The questioning that I explained to some of you that Mr. Barr was a Canadian federal government, what we would nowadays call a crown attorney. He was King's Counsel.
George Barr was, yes.
Yes, George Barr. And today it's what we would call a federal crown attorney.
Correct.
Right? And he was asking questions of Russell Roger Smith, the man who wrote these 3 clauses that you see on your screen here, sections 7, 1, 2, and 3. And he's asking the author of these, what do they mean? And I posted on my own page just a few days ago that Mr. Smith replies, there hasn't been a Governor General dutifully and properly appointed by the British government / Crown.
You're jumping ahead here, Duke. I'm going to have to stop you.
Okay.
So let me
It
continue
just gets
on
all
here.
rolling around in my head, and the snowball gets coming out. I can't help it, Doug.
I know, and hey, look, we all love you for that, Duke. but so Russell Roger Smith's response to that question that Mr. Barr just posed to him, insofar as the Dominion is concerned, it doesn't change anything. And Smith's answer is, the answer is absolutely not. The British North American Act is a statute of the Imperial Parliament creating an ancillary body to aid and advise the Governor General. It could only be effective if there is a duly appointed Governor General of Canada. As no person receives any credentials from the Crown and Chancery to act as a Governor General of Canada, we may, if we choose, disregard the British North American Act. Section 7.2 grants to each province individually those powers which were granted to the Commonwealth of Australia, the Union of South Africa, the Irish Free State, New Zealand and Newfoundland. The provinces of Canada can either assert themselves as sovereign states, or they may mutually agree to create a union of provinces. So, so what happened there? What did the Statute of Westminster do? It nullified the position of Governor General. It nullified the letters patent, which are known as the British North American Act. Didn't nullify the British North American Act, it nullified them as letters patent.
Right.
And it also, more importantly, nullified the Dominion of Canada and the legislature for the United Colony, or what Mr. Barr calls the Dominion Parliament, ceased to exist on December the 12th, 1931, due to this act.
Now, I've had people asking me, why would the government send a lawyer to find out what this meant to Canada? And I've told people because they wanted to know how badly their ass was exposed.
That is correct. Why else would you send a lawyer?
Yeah. Like, it's basically the criminals said, go find out if we can get out of this.
And they could. All they had to do was go home and close the door after they let people know that they need to hold constitutional conventions in the provinces.
Yeah, basically Bonnie and Clyde had to give up their guns and say, okay, we're done robbing banks and killing people. That's all they had to do.
So anyways, Barr asked the follow-up question here, which is very interesting. What if any difference is there in respect to the appointment of a Governor General in Canada since the passing of the Statute of Westminster? Because don't we have a Governor General today?
Appointed by our government.
Okay. So Smith, in answering this question, he says, in answering your question, I may say without fear of contradiction that since the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, no Governor General has been dispatched to Canada by the British government or any department of that government. Isn't that interesting?
Considering the documents that everyone like Max Bernier hold up and say, the British North America Act created our country, but yet the British North America Act's been punched so full of holes and chunks of it removed, what created the parts of it that created our country don't exist anymore. They're not there.
Actually, the British North American Act did not create the country.
It created the Governor General and a government.
No, it created it. It was let. You've got to understand something. The British North American Act was only one thing. It was blueprint for a government controlled by and completely controlled by the Governor General, period. They could not do anything without his permission. He created the office of the Prime Minister. He created the Parliament. He created all the ministries. He created the lieutenant governors that went to the provinces, and the lieutenant governors had a blueprint from the British North American Act to create the governments of the provinces that they had absolute control over.
Yep.
And we're talking about a dictatorship here. And the dictatorship ended in the UK at the Crown and Chancery, which was the constitutional monarchy. We were a colony of the United Kingdom, and their dictator that worked on their behalf, his position was called the Governor General. So people need to understand that the British North American Act, when the Statute of Westminster ended the position of Governor General, it ended the letters patent. It did not end the British North American Act. The British North American Act was returned to its owner. Who were the owners of the British North American Act? The United Kingdom. The Parliament and the monarchy in England under the constitutional monarchy owned that document. It was given back to them by the Earl of whatever he was in 1931, March of 1931. He then returned the British North American Act to the UK. Now, the interesting thing is, don't forget that I think it was Walter Coole who said that if the provinces wanted to use the British North American Act, all they had to do was send a notice to the United Kingdom, send it to the Parliament, and say, we've decided to federate, but we would like to use the British North American Act as a blueprint for a constitution that we're going to create. Now, did that happen on February 12th, 1931? No. Did it happen on any day between 1931 and March, 22nd or 23rd, 2019? No, it never did. They've never actually asked for it. And the provinces, it's their property. Don't belong to any federal authority. The only people that could ask for it were the provinces. Why? Because they are the sovereign nations. And so when they ask a sovereign, you have to be a sovereign.
Yeah, it's again, we're back to why did Trudeau go to the Queen to register to charter his government?
Well, by the way, we'll get into that.
You have to go to an equal entity, right?
Dude, he never chartered a government. He incorporated. He did a maritime incorporation. But we'll get into that a little later in the show. I just want to, I'm trying to emphasize here so that the people understand that the Statute of Westminster, the federal authority today will say, oh, it doesn't mean anything, because we remember what I read on Barr a few minutes ago. They believe that the Statute of Westminster, or they would like you to believe that the Statute of Westminster didn't change anything as far as the Dominion was concerned. Now, of course, we now know that's an absolute lie.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to continue on because this is very interesting. So Barr, or Smith, says, let me repeat what Barr said. What, if any, difference is there okay, we did that. Sorry. So when Smith responded that there's no Governor General has been given, he says, so Barr says, under these circumstances, Mr. Smith, what would your recommendation be to the Canadian people in order to remove this anomaly and establish a government that would be the sovereign authority? See what Barr has done here. He has now admitted that the federal authority isn't sovereign. Why would he ask the question? What can the Canadian people, in order to remove this anomaly and establish a government that would be a sovereign authority? Because he's now admitted that the government isn't a sovereign authority.
In
think
that
about
question, he knocking my microphone over here. Just by asking that question, he's making that admission.
Correct. Because
if they weren't, he wouldn't need to ask the question.
Absolutely. Now we're getting somewhere. So Smith says, in my opinion, the logical solution is a federal union. It is illogical for us to decry disunity in Canada before a union has been achieved. So what is Smith saying there? Well, if people are saying, wait a minute, blah, 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 and yelling and screaming and all about separation and what we need to do this and we need to do that, he's saying you can't have disunity or separation without first having a unity,
Yep.
a confederation. So even back in the 1940s, when this interview was done, they're going back and forth, and Barr just exposes the true fraud of what's been perpetrated for the last about 18, 19 years that had passed before this, 1931 to 1940, 11 or 12 years, I'm sorry. My math is off tonight. I'm using Common Core. Even at that point, there's still an opportunity for us in Canada, in the sovereign nation provinces, to hold a constitutional convention and seat a federal authority. There's still time to do that. So as time went on, many frauds started to take place. After this interview was done, Mackenzie King in 1947 decided that he was going to fake letters patent, and he did, and he signed them. And we'll actually be doing an entire video in the series we're dedicating to those faked letters. I actually have originals, photographs of the originals that I'll be putting into that video for people to view. They also decided that they were going to call the British North American Act in 1940, in 1951 and 52. They called it the British North American Act. Yet, here's the funny thing. The British North American Act is in the United Kingdom. So how did they get a British North American Act in 1940? How did they get a British North American Act in 1953, 1952, 1960, 1961, 1974, when it's sitting in England?
Yeah, it's not a Canadian law. It never came here.
It doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in Canada. The federal dominion can't ask for it. It's not theirs to ask for. Only the provinces which are sovereign can ask another sovereign for the paperwork.
Yeah.
So how did they get their hands on it? They didn't. This is all made up. This is make-believe. They have no authority. The only authority they have today is at the point of a gun. That's it. I'll tell you, you don't stop when you're pulled over. They finally knock you off the road. See how many police officers are all there with their guns pulled. Oh. You slam the door in a police officer's face and tell them to F off. You wait 10, 15 minutes and watch SWAT kick your door down.
Yep.
You don't pay the taxes on your house. Who comes along and throws you out of your house? You don't pay your income tax on time. Who comes along and seizes your bank accounts?
Yeah.
And if you complain, what do? Put you in jail at the point of a gun. So the only authority that they have is through the point of a gun.
Yeah,
but
the enforcement of their laws to control us.
They don't have laws.
Wow.
Once again, it's so important. Today, we need to understand that the words we use cut our own throats. And you use words like it's their laws, but they don't have law. They have what we call color of law. In other words, what looks like law but isn't. It's pretend. But if you don't do what they say you should do, they stick a gun in your face.
Yep.
So how is that democracy? I call it democracy.
Democracy. Yeah, and we see what's happening with democracy in France.
Well, and here's the funny
just
thing.
About enough of 51% controlling the other 49%.
So it wasn't bad enough that they're fraudulently there, but they also wanted to make sure that, okay, so you get to vote. Ooh, boy, I get to vote and change things. This is great. I don't like that dirty bastard in Ottawa that Justine Trudeau is giving all our money away to all the UN and all these other nations, and our people are sleeping on the streets. Yeah, well, go vote and get them out. Oh, wait a minute. Here's a funny thing. In 1988, there was a guy called Littlechild, and he was an MP, and he got voted in. He got a landslide victory. And the reason he got a landslide victory, because he said, if you vote for me, I will not sign the NAFTA agreement. I am 100% against the NAFTA, and he won his riding massively. The other guy didn't even come close. He gets to Ottawa, and NAFTA comes through, and they say, all in favor of NAFTA? He sticks up his hand and says, me, I'm in favor of NAFTA. So his constituents were very upset with him. They took him to court. They sued him in court for not living up to what he said he was going to do when he got voted in. And the judge said, you constituents, you lose. The politicians can lie to you, can cheat to you, can tell you whatever story they want. And if you elect them, they have no regards to you after they're elected. In other words, big middle finger.
Yep.
So, yeah, you go vote for the guy and get Justine Trudeau out. The next guy coming in, let it be Maxime Bernier, or who's the other guy?
Andrew Scheer.
Moby Dick.
No, honestly, Doug, I've been telling people for a year that politicians have what's colloquially called parliamentary immunity, which is a fancy way of saying they don't have to listen to you. They can tell you whatever they want and do as they please. Once you vote for them, that's it. You got no choice. You got no control. There's nothing you can do until the next election, and you choose another criminal to lie to you.
So here's the big thing here. Why bother? Why get involved? Don't look. If there's certain things that you have to do in life to live here in Ontario. In where are you in St. Catharines? Me here in Toronto. Certain things that I have to interact with the local authority, for lack of a better term. If I want to drive a vehicle, I'm going to have to get license plates for the vehicle. I'm going to have to buy insurance for the vehicle. I'm going to have a driver's license to operate that vehicle. I know that. So when I don't own a vehicle, but I rent vehicles. So from time to time, I'll rent a vehicle. I don't go and park it illegally because the law, the statutes say you can't park illegally. I don't speed, well, a lot. At least I don't get caught speeding.
There we go.
And I because I've signed a contract and I know that I'm under a contractual obligation. If I want to read the contract, I can simply go online. It's called the Ontario Highways Act. That's the contract you sign when you apply for a driver's license. And so that's your contract. Read it, understand it, and if you're in breach of it, they're going to come after you and beat you over the head until you open your wallet and pay them. But that's what criminals do. But what I'm saying, there are certain things that we don't have to be involved in. And one of them is voting. We should stop voting. Why? If nobody in Canada voted in the next election, what would happen to the government? It would collapse. It would collapse.
The problem with that is the special interest me groups will go out and vote, and the patriots won't.
Of course, but I'm just saying, in a perfect world, if we all stopped voting, they couldn't seat a government because there's nobody there. It's no longer anybody is in the government. So what happens to it? There's nobody seated. It's gone. Nice. What a wonderful thing to do. But there's also other things that you can do. That you look at what you're doing in your life and think about, okay, what are the things that I have to interact with this de facto governance, both at the community level, St. Catherine level, up to the provincial level, up to the federal level? What are the things that I only, and then stop doing the stuff that you don't have to do? And you'll find your life gets a lot easier, first of all. I like living in Toronto for a good reason. The transit system here, believe it or not, is actually quite good. And I'm not sure whether it's because it's a good government or because they decided to allow the transit system to be autonomous and on its own and not interfere with it. I'm not really sure, but it's actually quite good here. The subway system and the bus system and everything. So in Vancouver, when I lived in Vancouver, I owned a car. I had to own a car because the transit system out there was crap. And so you have to drive everywhere. And so here in Toronto, you don't need one if you live in the city. If you live in the GTA, where you're out in Mississauga or up in, okay, I don't know enough about Toronto to tell you. Vaughan, I think, is another thing, and another one called Markham. Yeah, I can't think.
You can get from way out east in Markham,
but they have GO trains and stuff like that
on TTC Transit.
So there is ways that you can opt out of actually having to drive. Or I keep a driver's license simply because if I come out and visit you, Duke, I'm going to rent a car for a couple of days. I'll drive out to Niagara-on-the-Lake and spend a couple of days with you. Won't get behind the wheel of the car when we get really shit-faced drunk and have to crawl back to the hotel rather than drive, simply because under the Ontario Highways Act, it says I shouldn't be operating a vehicle while intoxicated. Right?
Well, yeah, and between you and I, it's a good idea. We won't discuss Sea to Sky Highway.
No. I hadn't had a drop of alcohol.
Interesting phone calls, folks.
I never had a drop of alcohol in my blood when I did that, though. Not a drop.
I know, and that's why I'm saying, imagine if you had.
Oh, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Exactly.
That would have been a head-on collision with a rock wall.
That's a whole other story, folks.
Actually, that would have been a head-on collision with a mountain.
Come if you want to hear the story. Come to Ottawa. Doug's going to be in Ottawa July 20th. You can sit down at the rally and maybe he'll tell you the story about his Porsche.
Anyway, so we're getting a little off topic here. So let's come back to what we were talking about here. And so we've gone through the Statute of Westminster. So what is the Statute of Westminster? What did that confer onto us? It conferred the provinces, the 10 provinces, became sovereign nations. And how do we know that to be a fact? Well, the final piece of the puzzle from the Statute of Westminster is Section 11. Okay? Can you scroll that one up there, Duke?
Yeah. Let me just bring this up here. Where did I put it? That one. This one. And we'll take us down to Section 11, you said?
Section 11 of the statute. It starts with notwithstanding.
Notwithstanding, yeah.
Okay. So.
Right. I'm just highlighting it. There we go. Sorry, folks. It's way down at the bottom of your screen, if you can see that.
So Smith is...
Transition this over. Bring that up, and there you go. Okay, folks. Hopefully you can see that way down at the bottom of your screen, Section 11, notwithstanding. Go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
So Barr asked, so as we said, Barr asked what is, if any difference, is the respect to the appointment of a Governor General since passing of the Statute of Westminster, and he answered that I may say without fear of contradiction that since the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, no Governor General has been dispatched to Canada by the British government. Okay? Under these circumstances, Barr said, what would you recommend? Oh, I've already said that. Sorry. Oh, I'm an idiot. So, the notwithstanding anything in the Interpretations Act 1889, the expression colony shall not, in any act of Parliament of the United Kingdom, passed after the commencement of this act, include a Dominion or any province or state forming part of the Dominion. Paraphrase. And Barr says that as there is no intermediate status between that of a colony and a sovereign state, and any province of Canada is no longer a colony, they must of necessity be sovereign states, as they come within the requirements set for that in Section 11. As there is no intermediate status between that of a colony and a sovereign state, any province of Canada is no longer a colony. They must, of necessity, be sovereign states. If they're not a colony, they're a sovereign state, because there's nothing in the middle that they could possibly be. They're either a colony,
you're
or
one
they're a
or
sovereign
the other.
state. Right. Section 11, and that's the beautiful part of the Statute of Westminster. That's the period at the end of the sentence that says, no more Dominion of Canada. The end. Period.
1931.
So, what did we learn? Let's recap. The position of Governor General, due to the Statute of Westminster, was nullified.
Yeah.
The letters patent necessary for the Governor General to seat in the corporation sole known as the Dominion of Canada, nullified. The British North American Act that acted as the letters patent went back to Britain to their owners. The legislator of the United Colony, aka the Dominion Parliament, ceased to exist.
I understand it. I comprehend it.
Yeah. So, what do we have today? We have criminal fraud.
Yeah.
That has been perpetrated on the sovereign people of the 12 sovereign states. Don't forget, we have 2 territories that have de facto governance that are also sovereign, not just the provinces.
Now, that's something I thought about, because you mentioned to me on the phone that there's 12, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we have 3 territories, and then my brain went click and said, no, none of it is not a legal entity. It was created by a criminal regime.
Yay!
So we really only have the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. None of it does not legally exist as a geographic sort of governmental entity.
Correct.
It's the criminals came along and said, well, yeah, okay, we'll just make it there, and all the people will be happy because we'll tell them now they live in none of it.
Yeah. Well, and
but
so
we're not having none of it.
So the thing here too is, Duke, in understanding this, there's only one thing that can be done, and it's not interact with the de facto. We do not interact with the de facto. Why? Because as soon as we do, we've consented to their existence.
So how do we
proceed? How do we proceed? We pay them no attention and create constitutional conventions.
Bingo.
And because we don't have to pay attention to them. Just because they're a crying little baby screaming for money out of your wallet doesn't mean you have to pay attention to them. Don't slap them. Don't scream at them. Just turn your back.
Leave them in their crib and let them cry themselves to sleep.
Correct. It's not your kid anyway, so what the hell do you care?
Close the bedroom door, turn the stereo up, put some Led Zeppelin on, and who cares?
And have a beer.
Kid cry.
And have a beer. So this is why I'm at because remember you were talking about these other people that were doing things, and you can name them, I don't care, but if you look at what these other people that were doing things, they're interacting with the de facto. They're fighting with the de facto. And they're giving the de facto consent to exist. Why would you do that? Why would you get involved in allowing the de facto to exist?
It's funny you mention that because I've been watching the Facebook chat room and there's a lot of talk in there right now about the CPU. And I just clicked you saw my screen change over there. I just opened the Facebook chat to see what's going on. And the very first post I see is from Dean Martin. Plain and simple, stay away from the CPU. They're not going to achieve anything. The CPU, just like the referendum initiated by the citizens, that all relies on the criminal regime admitting that they're criminals and giving you the right to take them down.
Correct.
That's not going to happen. That's like asking Bonnie and Clyde to give you their guns so you can shoot them.
Well, and I loved what you said a few weeks ago. You said, it's Al Capone giving you the keys to his kingdom and allowing you to put him in jail.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what people are asking. That's what they're expecting.
And
they're expecting legal, proper activity from an illegal, improper entity. What's hard to grasp that it ain't going to happen.
That's correct. And the worst, okay, well, let's talk about the CPU for a moment.
Okay.
I've been inundated with people sending me the documentations and asking me to take a look at them and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And I've taken a look at the stuff, and the people that have contacted me, I've advised privately to politely say thank you very much, but no thank you. And for good reason, because when you file this documentation in the courts, and if you're one of, let's say, 1,000 or 5,000 people that actually do this, you can be charged with vexatious filings, and that holds jail time. Now, the people that told you to file, they're pretty much immune because they sure as hell ain't going to file this stuff because they don't want to go to jail. But if enough comes through, I mean, I can see that the people in the courts, when they get this stuff in, they might have to change their underwear because they peed themselves laughing so hard. A few of the judges will be passing that around from one to another and having a good joke about it. But at the end of the day, if they get a waterfall of this stuff, they're going to start charging people. And that's not going to end well for anybody involved. And that's just the way it is. When you poke the illegal bear with a stick, that illegal bear, first of all, snaps the stick out of your hand and then grabs his truncheon out of his back pocket and beats the crap out of you with that. And makes examples of you.
I have a question here in the Facebook chat. Elizabeth Seawalt says, are you saying that all laws and changes to Canada is all illegal?
No, there are no laws in Canada. It's color of law.
Canada doesn't exist.
They don't exist. Well, they don't legally exist, legally or lawfully exist. They are de facto, and so everything that they do, including the debt, belongs to them, not to us. We are the sovereign people on the 12 sovereign nations that make up the landmass that's commonly known as Canada. What we haven't done is come together with unity, and I'm talking everybody, not, oh, well, we can't include him because of the color of his skin, or we can't include him because of the religion he believes in. That's what they want you to do. That's divide and conquer and keeps you in disunity where they want you to be, because that's how they control you, through disunity.
The biggest and longest running form of division and disunity is liberal and conservative political parties.
Correct.
Political parties are one of the biggest ways to divide the population. Eliminate political parties, make you vote for the guy that comes and knocks on your door and talks to you, not for some guy on the TV screen 3,000 miles away from you.
I have a little baseball bat that I hit those people with.
That's frowned upon, Doug. You're not supposed to promote violence. Come on.
No, it's a Nerf bat.
It
doesn't actually hurt them.
Wrapped in fiberglass and aluminum.
No. That would actually hurt them. But I hit them over the head with a Nerf bat. They get the idea. I had a friend growing up. His father, he was because back in the 60s when I was a kid, we didn't have gun control as we do now. And his father was a very interesting guy. As a matter of fact, his father was a guy who taught me how to shoot and proper safety around weapons. But he used to have fun during election time because people would come knocking at the door, and he had a beautiful nickel-plated .357 Magnum. And he used to get his son to open the door after a few knocks, and he'd stand in the hallway, at full, with the gun at full extension, go, "Who the fuck are you? What do you want?" And he said, many a time you could smell the fear as they ran away.
A buddy of mine used to pull out. A buddy of mine's an antique gun collector. He's into black powder guns, and when his daughter was younger, a teenager, anytime a new boyfriend was coming over to pick her up, he'd have all his guns laid out on the kitchen table and the kitchen counter, cleaning them. When the boyfriend showed up, he'd look at the boyfriend and say, "She's home at 10, right?" "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. She's home at 10.
I had a girlfriend who had a father just like that. And he did the same thing with his handguns. And the first time I came over, and I looked at the table and I went, "Oh, cool. Look at that. It's a Glock 9. And I picked it up. I made sure it wasn't loaded, pulled the slide back on it, looked down the barrel, flipped it around, dropped the clip, put it on the table, then took the slide off it and disassembled it for him. And I said, "Wow, that's a beautiful gun." And I looked at the other ones and he went, "Don't touch them." He said, "Can you put that back together for me?" And I said, "Sure." Do-do-do-do-do. And I put it back on the table. And he goes, looks at his daughter, he says, "Yeah, he's a good guy. You go out with him." Anyway, yeah. But I like guns as they are good tools to use, and they come in handy, especially if you're in the bush and you come across an animal that wants to eat you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just reading the YouTube chat, trying to keep up with everybody talking in two chat rooms here, and I'm listening to you and reading with my eyes. Okay. I'm still there.
Well, one of the things I was hoping you would take an opportunity to read the resolutions from Assembly Number 2, Native Sons of Canada.
I just quickly
you didn't have
through it.
You didn't have an opportunity. But here's the thing, and the reason I asked you to do that is because if you look at the way it was put together, and you look at what happened in 1982, I would say that Mr. Trudeau went to the archives and pulled the little piece of paper and decided to create the Canada Act to look something like this.
You think so?
I know so.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, let's go to Section 2 of that. Can you bring that up on screen?
Section 2 of...
The resolutions for the Assembly Number 2, Native Sons of Canada.
Hang on just a second. Statute. Okay, I'm going to have to open that in an email. Give me just a second here, Doug.
Okay. Thought you had it on your desktop. Sorry.
No, that's one I haven't downloaded yet. No, I haven't downloaded it yet. It's still in the email.
Well, how did you scan it if you hadn't downloaded it? You just lied, and I caught you.
No. I click on it in my email, and it opens up, and I read it. Resolutions from, that's 1926, Native Sons of Canada, right?
Correct.
Okay, there we go. Now I'll bring it up as a screenshot. And we'll flip over to that. And there. That should have it. People should be able to see that now. Let me just... Sorry, folks. I know you're looking at a picture of my desktop that's kind of goofy for you to look at, but I want to move Doug's camera. if I can find it. Why can't I find this? Okay. We'll just flip this over, and people can read it the way it is.
Well, here's what it says.
There we go. That's got you up there.
So number 2 is about immigration. Now, this is 1926. Remember this. This assembly is unalterably opposed to assisted imperial immigration in any form, and in particular is opposed to the policy designed to unload on Canada immigrants from Great Britain as alleged settlers who are mentally, morally, and physically unfit, thereby tending to lower the high standard of Canadian citizenship. We hereby urge on the Government of Canada the need for closer restriction rather than relaxing the tests and standard for admission to Canada. In this connection, this Assembly respectfully begs to draw the attention of the Prime Minister and his colleagues to the pernicious and incessant imperial propaganda constantly issued by both Great Britain and in Canada, which is aimed at unloading deserters and other undesirables into Canada with the designed object of relieving the British taxpayer at the expense of the Canadian taxpayer. Does that not sound familiar?
To put that in
modern
man's
vernacular,
terms, folks.
No, but in modern vernacular, what did Justine Trudeau open the borders to where and who and what?
Yeah, exactly. And what they're complaining about here in 1926 is they're saying England is dumping all their unwanteds on Canada. They're taking them up out of the homeless shelters and the everywhere else where they find, bums sleeping on the street, homeless people. They're putting them on ocean liners and sending them over here.
Criminals, deserters from the military. Instead of, yeah.
Yeah.
It says right
they
there.
Didn't want in England, they sent over here.
Yeah, which is aimed at unloading deserters and other undesirables. So what does Justine Trudeau do? He says, hey, send all the illegal immigrants to Canada. We'll take them. As a matter of fact, if you're from ISIS, come on home.
This assembly condemns such anti-Canadian propaganda as being distinctly inimical to the national welfare of Canada. What does inimical mean?
Christ, I don't know. Look it up. Okay, we'll go look it up. Hang on a second. I'll look it up.
Here's another little sentence right at the beginning of the next paragraph. And this just triggered in my head, clunk, UN Migration Pact.
Yeah.
They emphatically declare that the question of immigration into Canada is, by terms of the British North America Act, exclusively Canada's own business, not the United Nations. That's my added words, but the first part, it's Canada's own business. We decide who comes into our country.
So, inimical means adverse in tendency or effect, unfavorable, harmful.
Unfavorable. Detrimental.
There you go.
Okay.
So I thought this was rather interesting that they would put this in 1926. This was a problem back then. It's still a problem today with the de facto government.
They're not de facto, they're criminals.
Same. We'll just... the criminal de facto government.
You told me that a de facto government was a government put in place on a temporary basis to avoid anarchy.
Correct.
And that these guys aren't
under the de facto doctrine, that's exactly what it is. And it is a criminal organization. It's an ongoing criminal fraud organization. And the worst part of all of this, Duke, is that they are ongoing committing treason to the sovereign people of Canada. It's an ongoing treasonable act against the sovereign people on the landmass known as Canada and the 10 sovereign nations that are the provinces and the 2 sovereign territories. And we seem to take it, and we got to stop. And we don't need guns to stop it. We don't need to go out and start a war. All we need to do is sit down, get together in constitutional conventions, and the point of a pen is a whole lot mightier than any sword.
Yep. Anyone who doesn't think a pen is mightier than a sword, look at what Iqra Khalid did with a pen. She created M103 and killed your freedom of speech with a pen. She never once had to put a bullet in a gun.
Correct.
Now, we're getting a lot of people. I'm just going to take this off of the screen here and do a little backroom TV engineering here. We're getting a lot of questions, especially in the YouTube chat room from John Beard. How do we resolve this? How do we move forward? John, be patient. We're going to get to that next Sunday night, March 31st. Doug and I are going to touch on it tonight. But we, the people, have to start the process. And I'm going to talk about that next Sunday night on my CPR show. The new beginning. It's springtime. It's time to plant and start growth.
Well, and it's very important that we stop looking at people as our enemies. The only enemies we have are the politicians in Ottawa and the bureaucrats that support them. That's it. Everybody else, go become friends with, because these are the people that are going to be in the trenches with us when we're creating the constitutional conventions and the constitutions that come from those. We need everybody, not just a few, but everybody. It's so important that we create unity, that we embrace each other to the detriment of them, because they want us to divide and conquer. That's the only way they win. When we are at odds with each other.
Yep, they want liberals against conservatives and NDP against both of them. They want that.
They also want, and I hate to say this, but they also want color against color.
Yep.
Religion against religion. Gender against gender.
Doug hasn't seen the video, but most of my audience knows what I'm talking about when I tell you about Jorgen Vollrath standing in the back of a pickup truck in Medicine Hat, Alberta, telling people they divide us with color, they divide us with income, they divide us with religion, they divide us east versus west, black versus white. And his answer? Fuck them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the problem that we have, is that we believe that people that don't look like us or don't think like us shouldn't be around us. And that's ridiculous. Everybody contributes in their own way, and some more than others. And it doesn't matter what color your skin is, or what your religious belief is, or what your sexual desire is, except I make one exception in sexual desire. Anybody that wants to have sex with little children, well, we have a very special room for you. The walls come in and collapse upon themselves. Anyway. But beyond that,
I'm not even going to delve into that issue, because
my
concepts on that will get me put in jail.
But what I'm saying, Duke, is that they want us to be at odds with each other. They introduced feminism, they introduced gay rights, they introduced LGBT, transgenderism, they introduced Black Lives Matter, they introduced white supremacy, they introduced all of these things and it comes truly from one source, which is called cultural Marxism, which is where it all started back in the 1930s. And it's been slowly permeating through societies, not just here in Canada, but also in the United States and Europe. And you can really see what's happening in Europe. It's really gotten very nasty over there. With what's happened in Sweden. I have visited Sweden many times, and have been there a long time before this all happened. And it was a very very nice place to be, and very safe. You could walk around at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, never have to. And in the worst part of the, I can't remember the name of Stockholm, the worst part of Stockholm, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you never had to worry about getting knifed or robbed or anything. But today, you can't go in certain parts of Stockholm in the middle of the day without worrying about getting killed, let alone getting knifed and robbed. They'll kill you in those areas. And so, and this is due to allowing, it's right, it's that open door immigration policy that you're bringing in people that you've just bombed the shit out of their country and killed their relatives. And now you're saying, oh, well, you survived, come to my country and get involved, and we'll embrace you. And the last thing they want to do is be embraced. They just want to kill you motherfuckers for killing his family. I can't see as I blame them. I think the number one thing we need to do, if we're going to still work with the de facto for a little while, is stop them from thinking it's a good idea to go bomb Libya back to the Stone Age, to go bomb Syria back to the Stone Age. These people have families, they have children, and we're killing them, and then we're inviting the survivors over here?
Yep.
Somehow I don't think that's a good idea. Common sense would tell me, wait a minute, I'm better off not to say come on over than I am to say, wait a minute, there's a better idea even than that, Duke. Let's stop bombing them. Let's allow them to have their lives in their countries.
Yeah,
we're not bringing them anything.
They do in their country. I'm going to work.
Exactly. But let them do it over there, not here. They can then they can do what they want. Anyway.
Every time I see people saying, well, we have to get rid of our borders and allow mass immigration and multiculturalism, all I think of is Tom Quiggins' quote, wars are fought over borders. When you remove the borders, wars are fought over neighborhoods.
That's a good quote. I like that.
Yeah, it really, when I see what's been happening in Europe and I see what's coming here in Canada, starting here in Canada, it holds so true.
We've been lucky so far. We haven't had a lot of, we don't see what's going on in Europe is day to day. What we have here in Canada is month to month. The things that are going on in Europe are getting really bad, which is why places like Hungary and Czechoslovakia have built walls. They won't let them in.
Yeah.
And they're actually safe places now, whereas you go, I used to go to Europe all the time. I fly through Frankfurt, and because it's a nice hub for Lufthansa Air, and I'd always stay there a couple of days, maybe, or at least a day before I would go elsewhere. Like I used to go up to, it was a lot cheaper to fly into Frankfurt than it was to Zurich in Switzerland, but it's only a 4-hour drive from Frankfurt to Zurich anyway. And you can rent really nice cars over there, like BMW 5 Series, for what you pay for a really cheap rental over here. And so you'd spend a few days in Germany. I'd gone to Austria, to Vienna and so forth. It's beautiful. Today, you go to Frankfurt is a danger zone, right daytime, doesn't matter, day or night. Munich, same thing. It's horrible. There's areas in Frankfurt that you dare not go at any time of the day.
Oh,
and I mean, God Almighty.
Leeds, England.
Here in Toronto. I'm sorry?
Leeds, England is the same thing. My cousin lives in Leeds. She told me back last fall, back last year, that I won't repeat this. It's gross. It grosses me out. But you can't go from the east side of the street to the west side of the street because you'll get killed on the west side of the street. You're entering a Muslim no-go zone.
Well, it's not only, and the funny thing is, it's not only Muslims. Okay. No. But if you ever go down if you're ever in France, and you get the chance to go on to the south coast. There's beautiful places. Nice, Marseille is a place you don't want to go. Used to be very nice, very old, fishing, all that other good stuff. And now today it's probably the septic tank of the world. It's just disgusting.
Wow.
And it's gone from being beautiful old architecture and you know, the docks and so forth that the fishing boats were in, that would come in, to just being this great big shithole. And it's not just Muslims. There are people coming up there from West Africa who have no religion, just tribal. And they don't speak English. They don't speak French. Well, they do speak French. Some of them do. But they come out of the jungle and they've never seen a toilet before in their life. So they don't know what it is. So they shit on the street because that's what they did down in Côte d'Ivoire or Senegal. Because they didn't know any better. When they come, and they don't know what a shower is. So they go swimming in the ocean. They wash their clothing in the ocean. And so you go down in this beautiful coast, beautiful beaches, and they have all these people on the beaches naked doing their laundry. And they shit in the ocean. So they're doing their laundry while they're having a shit and a piss.
Lovely.
It's sad, and the problem is this is open door policy. So these people don't get and it's sad that they don't have an opportunity to integrate because they've never been given that opportunity. I'm not saying they shouldn't come. What I'm saying is this, is that if you're going to come, first of all, you learn the language, B, you learn the laws of the land, and C, you know what a fucking toilet is.
Yeah, it's called assimilate.
I call it integrating into society, because you've got, and bring a trade. Bring something that you're not going to detract. You're not going to go on the dole the minute you get here. And if you have to come and learn a trade, then bring enough money that will support you to go to school to learn a trade so that you can go to work. How about that? And if you can't qualify under either of those things, don't come.
That's how immigrants had to come here before.
Yep. Well, as you can see in 1926, not so much.
Yeah, well, as of 1926.
Well, no, don't forget, that was written in 1926. They were talking about what the British were doing since 1867.
True. That's how so many Irish immigrants got here. They just put them on boats and shipped them out.
Yeah, but at least the Irish worked hard.
They had no choice, that or starve.
Well, there's that too. Be careful, I got a little Irish in me. You don't want to get my ire.
So do I. I'm just reading the chat rooms here.
So anybody ask any further questions?
Lots of people are asking questions, and they all seem to focus around, how do we resolve this?
Okay, I'll say it again. What we're going to be doing at the Myth is Canada. We're redesigning the website that we have. We're reworking all of that, and we're going to put in a page called Constitutional Committees, which will take and be able for people to register with us, and we'll have information that they can download through PDF files and hold constitutional committee meetings in their neighborhoods with their neighbors, with their friends, with their family, and slowly get the information out so that people understand why we need a constitutional convention. Why do we need to seat a de jure government? I guarantee you, you walk out on the street where you live, downtown Niagara-on-the-Lake, and you go up to 10 people and you say, folks, we need to seat a de jure government here in Niagara-on-the-Lake, here in Ontario, and we need to hold a constitutional convention. will you join us to do that? And they'll look at you like you come from Mars. Because A, they don't know what a de jure government is, or why you need to seat one, and what the hell is a constitutional convention in the first place. So we need to start education. That's what The Myth is Canada is all about. The documentary film will be about that education. The tutorial videos that I'm shooting over the next few weeks are about that. They're about teaching people about the British North American Act, about the Statute of Westminster, about the Hudson's Bay Charter, and what that entailed, along with Rupert's Land Act and the Surrender Act. Also, we're going to delve into the detail, like I said, on the fraudulent documents that were created by Mackenzie King with the fake letters patent in 1947, and a couple of other things that they faked, like the British North American Acts. Also, we're going to talk about it. We're actually going to do it in two parts because it's a long one, and I've broken it up into two sections. The Canada Act, which will also include the Constitution Act, which will also include the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, 1982. And I'm also going to include why the Meech Lake Accord, why the Charlottetown Accord, et cetera, were created and what they were designed to do. Not what they told you they were going to do, but what they were actually designed to do. And we'll get into that as well, because this is information that the people need to know in order to understand why we need to get rid of the de facto and seat de jure governments. Because without that foundation of knowledge, Duke, how do people know what to do?
Exactly. I posted a video on my page earlier today promoting tonight, and I posted a video that I shot down in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and the title, the little caption I put at the top of the video when I posted it was, "You can't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from." And people can't plan for the future of what we need to do unless they understand where we're coming from and why we need to do it. And that's what I want to start. I know a lot of you out there in the chat rooms and watching this later, you're all like, okay, Duke, what are you going to tell us on Sunday? Well, what Doug was just talking about and what I just said, informing the people, that's what we're going to start working on next Sunday. Time for new beginnings. And the first step is educating the people. And we need all of us need all of you to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about on CPR next week on the 31st. Because when Doug and his crew, his team, get this information ready for us, we need to be able to do something with it. And if we wait until he's got it ready, we're wasting time. We need to have, as I put it to Doug this afternoon, we need to put the plumbing in place before the water can flow. And that's what we're going to start doing next Sunday. We're going to start building the plumbing for each country in this landmass.
Known as Canada, internationally.
Well, internationally known as Canada.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, we today live in the sovereign nation known as Ontario.
Yep.
Yet we refer to it as the province of Ontario because we're so programmed to think that way. And really, Duke, what we're trying to do here, what you, myself, the Myth is Canada is trying to do, is trying to get people to stop thinking that way. When I was a young lad in school, I had a professor tell me something that I've kept all these years. And he said to me, he said, Doug, if you continue to think the way you've always thought, you'll continue to get what you've always got. And that's what they want you to do. Don't change the way you think. Don't change the way you look at things, because that would expose them. And that's what you and I are doing here. We're trying to get people to change the way they think by changing the way they look at things.
Exactly.
By exposing them to the truth.
And I've told you, maybe I haven't told you this, and I don't remember who made this quote, but it really sticks in my head, especially at a time like this. It's easier to convince people of a lie than it is to convince them they've been lied to.
That's true.
And that's where we are today, ladies and gentlemen. We have to convince people they've been lied to since 1931. Their grandparents
Exactly
and
December the
great-grandparents.
12th.
Pardon me?
I say exactly December the 12th, 1931.
Yeah. And yeah, it's hard to convince people. I deal with it. You folks watch my live videos. I deal with it on the street when I'm out there protesting. I deal with it with people emailing me. What do you mean we're not legal? It's a lie that was told to your grandfather. Your grandfather believed it. He convinced your father of it. Your father convinced you of it. And now, if we don't stop it, you're going to convince your kids of it. It just goes on and perpetuates. The quote-unquote doctor that you spoke of, Doug, that's all she was doing, was perpetuating and building the snowball of the lie that's been fed to us.
So, hang on a second.
Yeah,
I'm kind of scrolling up here, and I'm looking at this, and there's a lady by the name of Kathy White.
Yes.
And she put links to de jure provincial working groups. Please join the provincial working groups for the province in which you reside and become part of forming a de jure government in your province. Sign up the constitutional conventions, grand juries, and legislative assemblies. And so I'm going on to the one for British Columbia because I think this is kind of fun.
Okay.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
Now it says here, this group is a closed group for people of British Columbia to organize what they need to do in relation to that, to what Canada Grand Jury and de jure Canada are doing for the people of British Columbia. So I'm guessing that this is the grand jury movement that was put together by Mr. Fortin. And I would suggest to people that before they join these groups, that they read Ho Canada.
If you need a copy, email me at dukewillis@gmail.com and I will send you a PDF copy of Russell Roger Smith's book, Ho Canada.
Well, and the problem, and I guarantee you once they read the book, they won't be signing up. Sadly.
Well, some of the people in my chat rooms have already gotten copies of Ho Canada, and they'll tell you when I mail it out to you, when I send it out as an email, I send you a copy of Ho Canada, I send you a copy of Walter Kuhl's letter to René Lévesque, and I send you some interesting little reading called Inside Canada. Doug, people that have gotten that, I haven't sort of delved into it and explained people what it is. Maybe you can entice people into wanting to read it.
Well, let me just come back to this grand jury thing for a second.
Okay. Yep.
Just briefly. And so let's break down. Jeff is a great guy, by the way. I've spoken with Jeff Fortin. I think he's legitimately he believes what he's doing is correct. And so I've listened to what he had to say, and I come away to ask questions. And the one question I've always asked of that, when the Statute of Westminster was completed in 1931, on December 11th, 1931, delivered to Canada, and what it did on December the 12th, 1931, was remove the position of Governor General, nullified the position of Governor General, nullified the corporation sole, nullified the letters patent, and nullified the Dominion of Canada. In the Act of 1893, called the Statutes Law Revision Act, they repealed Section 2 of the British North American Act, letters patent, that said there was a monarch. And in 1901, when Queen Victoria died, was the last monarch of Canada. So the question I would ask Jeff today is, so you've created a grand jury to seat a de jure government in a corporation sole that no longer exists, with the position of a governor general position that no longer exists, with letters patent that no longer exist, and a monarch that no longer exists. So how does that become de jure?
Yeah.
If it doesn't exist, and yet you're looking to seat people in there. The lieutenant governor's positions no longer exist because the governor general's position no longer exists. They were nullified in 1931. So how do you get a de jure government? By doing what you're doing. Do you not think that's a good question to ask?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not trying to be an asshole here. I'm just asking a question of common sense.
I think it's a good question to ask people. I have a question for you that Ed Jamnisek put to me the other day. I asked him, Ed, who appointed our current Governor General? And he said, well, the Prime Minister. And I said, wait a minute. The British North America Act created the Governor General and said that it's to be appointed by...
No.
Okay.
No. The British North American Act did not create the position of the Governor General. The position of the Governor General was created in before 1762, because the French used it as well.
Okay.
But it was the corporation's sole, that needed the position of the Governor General. So who created it was the British Parliament.
Okay.
The British Parliament, or the constitutional monarchy in Britain, created the position of the Governor General to seat them in the corporation's sole, known as what we knew it as the Dominion of Canada, 1867. But prior to that, it was just known as Canada. But if you look at the British North American Act, it created. It was the blueprint that the Governor General used to create the position of Prime Minister. So how does the position of Prime Minister that the Governor General create the position of the Governor General?
Exactly.
If there is no Prime Minister because there is no Governor General.
Yeah.
How does that happen? How can a non-existent Prime Minister create the existence of a Governor General that will create the position of the Prime Minister?
Yeah, how can the Father create the Son if the Son has to create the Father first?
Precisely. And when people actually think about this, they go, "Wait a minute, you're right." Wow. And common sense starts to dribble in. Cognitive dissonance leaves. The veil is lifted. The eyes clear. The brain unfogs itself, and then the who was it? Oh my goodness! The realizations of truth. There was Schopenhauer. Yeah, he said there are three realizations before you. What is it? The first one is denial. The second one was anger, and the third one was acceptance.
Yes.
And so people will get angry. They go, no, but that's cognitive dissonance. Then they get, oh my God, are you kidding? Well, how do we do? Let's get a gun and go kill these fuckers. And then they realize, no, wait a minute, there's a better solution. And that's where we'll accept this as what it is and we'll fix it. And that's what we're looking to do.
You and I talked about that very thing on the phone earlier this week. And after talking to you about it, Mark Twain's words came to my mind, because we spoke about how first they're gonna deny it, then they're gonna get violent and angry and fight about it, and we see that going on with Antifa, okay?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they're gonna say, "Oh, all right, we'll join you." And I thought of Mark Twain's statement where he says, "In the beginning of change, the patriot is a scarce man, a brave man, hated and scorned. But when his cause succeeds, the timid join him." And that's exactly what we're talking about here. They hate me. They scorn me. They want to beat the hell out of me personally.
Oh, yeah.
But as soon as I prove to them that what I'm doing is right, they're all going to turn around and go, "Duke, we love you."
Well, Duke, we are what are called the winter soldiers.
Yes.
Okay, and the reason that we're called winter soldiers is because we're the ones standing out on the front lines in the middle of winter at 40 below with a wind chill factor of 20 miles an hour and literally freezing our fingers off, but with our hands on the triggers. And we're standing guard. We're actually disseminating the truth. And then when enough people finally join us as winter soldiers and this thing starts to roll, and then we win, then we get what we call the Sunshine Patriots. Hey, we're here, and they're out cheering with you. But where were they when we needed them?
Yeah, Ron Devereaux and I were talking about that today when we finished up in St. Catharines. I said to him, because there was a cold wind when we first went out today, and at the end of the day I said to him, man, I can't wait for springtime. And he said to me, yeah, that's when all the rest of the Patriots will show up.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said to me today. He said, once the weather gets nice, we'll have all kinds of people out here with us.
Well, exactly. I mean, good God. I just got a IM from a friend of mine on Skype. And we're talking about solutions here tonight, but I was also asked to let people know about remedy. There is remedy, but remedy is not the solution. Remedy will take care of you between now and the solution happening. And I talked to you, I think, a little bit about this in the past, Duke.
Yep.
Where we see remedy in something called equity. And a lot of people now here in Canada that I've been speaking to recently over the last little while have been doing a lot of study of equity with a gentleman out of the United States. His name is Rourke. And he holds conferences about every 3 or 4 months in Houston, Texas. And they're very intense conferences. They start on a Friday and they end on a Sunday. And he goes at it for 8 to 10 hours a day, teaching about equity and about something called subrogation. And it's actually been working here. A few of the people that I've actually talked to and I know personally have actually been using that in some instances and actually having it work in the courts. And there's a group now in Alberta that's now going through the process of using subrogation to take care of taxes here in Canada, both income and house taxes and so forth. And there's people here in Ontario that have been using or trying to use it or going through the process of getting it up and running for the courts here as well, for taking care of basically CRA in the courts, along with fines, et cetera, that are passed down by the courts. And really it comes down to demanding your right of subrogation, and then there's a process that you will go through, which flips you from being the debtor to the creditor and allows the Crown, or the Crown Authority, to get paid, but not out of your wallet, off of the bond that was created at your birth, the birth bond. And it works like a hot damn in the U.S. There's been a group or 2 groups out of Australia that have been using it down there in New Zealand and Australia, and it's worked quite well for them down there. That's Romley at Justinian Deception, and a gentleman by the name of Rohan. You can type in his name on YouTube and it brings up their videos. Justinian Deception has their own website. People in England have been using this for quite a number of years, considering this is where the foundation of equity came from. It comes out of the history of common law, where they needed to build a bridge between common law and a way of getting remedy for accidents, et cetera, Your house burnt down, but it wasn't somebody's fault. It was an accident, and so you get an idea you have the ability to sue somebody to get some money for that. That's the equity courts. And so, but law over the years has claimed, once you claim your right of subrogation, you've moved the court jurisdiction into the highest level of jurisdiction you can get, which is equity, and it can't be reversed until you're given your right of subrogation, which is some of the learning that needs to go on. There's a lot more that needs to go on, and I suggest to people that, if they're interested in remedy, there's some places you can go. Rourke does not go on the internet. You won't find anything about him on the internet. You'll have to know somebody who's been to the conference. They can give you the information. You could go to another conference. If people are interested, I have some contacts that have gone to their conferences, and I may be able to get that kind of information for you. I wouldn't be able to post it anywhere simply because Rourke, once again, does not want his stuff up on the internet, period, and he's very, very protective about that. But that's remedy, and that's the only remedy I've ever seen so far to date that actually works. All the other stuff I've heard about, I've never actually seen it work.
And remedy, again, folks, is only a Band-Aid on the wound until you can get the surgery done.
Yeah,
okay?
It's not the solution, but it does help relieve what these guys want to do when they beat you over the head with these fines and these excessive tax assessments, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm just reading in the YouTube.
No, I know. I can imagine you. I imagine you've got a whole bunch of questions now. Yeah, and Kathy's back again with common law, and she says common law. Well, 1931, Dominion of Canada ended common law in Canada. It's that simple. We haven't had a common law court in Canada since December 10th, 1931. So how can you go into a jurisdiction that doesn't exist here in Canada?
All of our courts, that's what you need to realize, people. As soon as the government is gone, all of the courts and all the jurisdictions, your provincial governments, your local governments, your school boards, they're all gone with them. Our entire system is built from the top down. You can go back to 1792 and look at Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe. Okay? They built the Ontario government from a blueprint that he was sent with. And every government in this country, even the federal government, is designed exactly like what was created in 1792 in Niagara-on-the-Lake. The lieutenant governor had total control. He was
absolute control, not total control. Absolute control.
Absolute control. He and his appointed legislative council had veto over anything the legislative assembly, the 11 elected members of the community here in Niagara, they had total veto power over anything the people brought forward, and that still exists.
Okay, I got to read you something here. This is funny. So from the Interpretations Act of Canada, Canada, for greater certainty, includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial seas. Canadian waters includes the territorial sea of Canada and the internal waters of Canada. So what is Canada?
A ship at sea.
There you go.
And how are ships governed? By admiralty law. The captain has total, unquestioned authority.
Okay, there's two jurisdictions of law that are govern ships. Okay, and I'll give you a bit of a historical lesson here. In 1066, William the Conqueror came over to England and conquered England, and he laid siege to the city of London. Okay, and the siege only lasted 4 days because a deal was struck very quickly, because the city of London were merchants, they were businessmen, so they didn't, gosh almighty. So they made a deal. They said, give us the 1 square mile of the city of London and allow us our own jurisdiction of law. At that time, it was called law merchant because they were businessmen. And so the king said, sure, and we'll make a deal with you that you're going to allow us to prosper through the city, blah, blah, blah. And so they did. And so law merchant is the city of London's law. Okay? Over time, as the city of London grew financially, the landmass never grew. And by the way, that's sovereign land. When the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth, goes to visit the city of London, she crosses the Tower Bridge and meets the mayor of London halfway across and curtsies to him and bows.
Because it's not her land.
Well, who has the power too? By the way, the mayor of the City of London can come into the rest of England, and he don't have to do any of that. He has the power. But over time, what happened was law merchant slowly changed into maritime jurisdictional law, so that you would have all your contracts were done under maritime jurisdiction, because all of the trade was done on ships, or what they called bottoms. Yeah. And so the crews were put on, and the captain was the absolute authority on that ship. Now, over time, the British Empire grew, and what they had was they had the seas. They controlled the seas. And then maritime law, when you were on a British bottom military vessel, became admiralty law. And it was far, far stricter than maritime jurisdictional law. Canada today, under the incorporation document done in the City of London, is a maritime incorporation. And its jurisdiction is maritime law, not admiralty. And so that's why when they say Canada for greater certainty includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial sea of Canada, if we take the maximum of law that says the inclusion of one is the exclusion of all others, then what is Canada? It's water.
Yep.
That's all it is.
It doesn't include the land.
So, and here's the other tip off for you, that we're living in a maritime incorporation. They describe the Governor General. The Governor General means General of Canada, Admiralty, or Chief Executive Officer. Where do you find a Chief Executive Officer?
At the head of a corporation.
Correct.
Not at the head of a country empowered by we the people, at the head of a corporation where we the people are the employees, the slaves. That's what Canada's been, ladies and gentlemen. And only we the slaves can fix it.
Now here's another one. So under the Interpretations Act of Canada, when they use the word province, province means the province of Prince Edward Island. And you go, wait a minute. So anytime I read province within any of the legislature that they perform, and I see the word province, it only means the province of Prince Edward Island.
Haha, guess what I've got? Dun, da, da, da.
Da, da, da.
Wait
what do
a
you got,
second.
Dude?
I'm just going to pop this over, and then I'll put your You might be able to see it, actually. There it is right there. I took a clip out of the interview with Hugh on that channel. When you were putting this, you had your behind the camera guy pop this up on your screen for you there while you were with Hugh. I don't know if you can see it, Doug. It's the page that shows person or any word or expression descriptive of a person includes a corporation. Province means the province of Prince Edward Island. Province, when used as meaning a part of Canada other than Prince Edward Island, includes the Northwest Territories, Yukon Territory, and Nunavut Territory. Province means a province of Canada and includes Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. Maxim of law, the inclusion of one is the exclusion of others.
So yeah, where is British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland? Where are they in this? They're certainly not included.
No, they're not. It's just, I've explained it to people. I said, imagine if you read your local newspaper and there was, in the sports section of your weekly local newspaper, it said, at a baseball game on Saturday, Billy, Bobby, and Joey played against the team from the town down the street. Well, for all you know, Billy, Bobby, and Joey played all the positions of the infield and the outfield at the same time because no one else is listed. So you don't know who else was there. According to what you know, 2 years down the road reading this newspaper article, those are the only 3 people that played baseball that day for your home team. And that's what's happening here, is they're not listing all the others, and they're using the word includes as it means something other than what casual use of the word has led us to believe it means. That's why they get to... The English language is not a pure language. We have there, and there. Exact same pronunciation for 3 different words and 3 different uses of that word. That's not a pure language. Greek is a pure... Am I correct, Doug, that Greek is one of the only pure languages?
Well, it is a pure language. That's why we were talking, and the reason Duke brings this up, we were talking about the original Bible that came out of the councils of Nicaea in 325 AD. That they wrote it, they translated it from Aramaic and other languages within that time period into Greek, because Greek, once again, is what we call a pure language, whereas they didn't do it in Latin, because Latin, even though the Roman Empire spoke Latin, is not a pure language. But the language of the Roman academics has always been Greek, because the word written in Greek means just that. It doesn't have all other words. Like Duke was saying, in English, there, and there. In Latin, it was the same way. They had words that sounded and in some cases were spelled exactly the same, but all had different meanings.
Yeah.
And so that's why Greek was used to create the very first Bible, called the Sinai Bible. Good enough explanation?
One word, one meaning.
Correct.
English is a language that opens itself up for corruption and distortion just because of the way the language is used and created. I love the English language. It's a very effective tool for people that know how to use it. But bad people know how to use it to get away with bad things. And that's what's been happening here, folks.
Well, and this is the other thing that I tell people. You've got to understand and be very careful on what words you're using and what you're not. As a matter of fact, I scolded you a little bit at the beginning of the show tonight because of that.
Yep. You do that to me all the time. You correct me all the time. And folks, Doug will tell you, and I keep telling you, I'm not smart. I just know people who are. And people like Doug, I get close to having things right, and they'll correct me and help me fine-tune things. So it's not like Doug has been digging into this stuff for years. I've had some background into it, but nowhere near the depth he is. And he's teaching me as we're all going through this. So if I can learn this, you can learn it. I'm no friggin' Einstein, okay? And if I can figure it out, so can you.
By the way, Einstein had a 104 IQ. That was it.
Yeah, I know. Everybody thought he was a genius, and his IQ really was normal. A little bit.
Well, I mean, he was smart enough when he worked in the patent office. He was smart enough. He worked in the dead patents, okay, in the patent office in the United States, and he came across the theory of relativity because it was the guy who created it in 1803 disproved it in 1820. So he stuffed it in his shirt and took it home with himself, and because there was now no record of it in the patent office, and he went back a few days later and patented the theory of relativity in his name. And so that was the basis that everybody said, oh, he's a genius. Oh, my God, he came up with the theory of relativity, when he actually didn't. He just stole it. And the funny thing was that when he patented it back in, 1950s or 1940s, I can't remember, it took a long time for them to disprove it because it was disproved in the late 1980s. And so the guy who actually invented it in 1803 disproved it himself 17 years later, but Einstein kind of played the game.
That same type of game, not the exact same game, but the same type of game that's been getting played on us.
Well, and the problem that we have is that, and I'm doing what you're doing. I'm actually reading some of this stuff. Courtney talks about a straw man, and you got to be very careful with the stuff that you use, the words that you're using, because the reality is that yes, it might be a straw man, but they've already put cages out there for you to get caught up in by using these terms. You go to court and the judge says, well, it sounds like you're part of the Freeman organization. And because you talked about a straw man, et cetera, and these are the trigger words that will wind you up in jail. So you got to be very careful. Down in the States, they call it, well, you're part of the sovereign citizen movement. And I love the attorney that came up with that, because that's an oxymoron. You're either a sovereign or you're a citizen, but you're not a sovereign citizen.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen.
Yeah,
citizen is your agreement to ownership, to being owned.
No, actually, that's not exactly true, because a true citizen of a de jure government isn't a slave.
Right. Of a de jure government. In the case of
but
Canada,
we're not citizens here. The Citizenship Act in Canada is created by a de facto illegal and unlawful. So how can we be citizens? We are sovereigns, period. If you make claim that you're a citizen, then you're consenting to their jurisdiction and their authority. And you deserve everything they throw at you. So stop doing it, folks.
Did you see the comment in the Facebook chat about, it's scrolled up now, let me come back up here to it. Are you saying that the rest of us are excluded? Then what are we if not provinces? We're not provinces, Elizabeth. We are
sovereign nations.
Free sovereign nations, which means countries. 10 independent countries in a landmass that you and I have been told is called Canada. The truth is, it won't be Canada until all 10 free states seat sovereign de jure governments, and those 10 governments decide unanimously, or perhaps just 3 of them or 4 of them decide to form a union. Not all 10 have to join.
Correct.
The country of Canada ceased to exist when the Westminster Act was passed. A British law created the concept of Canada in 1867. Only a British law can change a British law. That happened in 1931. End of Canada. 60 some odd years it existed. After that, it's all been a lie. It doesn't exist.
Well, and the problem, Duke, is that Canada never had the opportunity to come together. The Dominion of Canada ended in 1931, but Canada, under a federated government, never was born. It never even got aborted, let alone be born. It was just looked over. They pretended that nothing changed. They pretended that the Dominion was still there.
Yeah.
And they pretend to this day that the Statute of Westminster means nothing. Don't look at that. That means nothing. We're the legal authority. And that's the problem, because people work hard. They come home. Today, you don't make a lot of money like you did in the 1960s, where one person could support a family of 4 easily. Today, it takes the father and the mother to support a family of 3. I went out looking just for fun the other day there's a new building that just went up the street from where I live, and it's a rental building for apartments. And it's 28 stories high. It's a beautiful building, and they're all rental units. And so I decided I'd go take a look at one. And the place is like a shoebox. It's about 650 square feet, but it's very nicely finished. Not top-end appliances or anything like that, but they wanted $2,600 a month.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You could buy
Who
a
can
house
afford
in St.
that?
Catharines for less money than that.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Who can afford $2,600 a month to live in a one-bedroom apartment? It takes two people to work to do that.
Yep. I have a question here in the Facebook chat from Ed Jamnisek. He says, but the fact that we vote federally makes it accepted. Ed, it drives me nuts that you think, well, I didn't tell my kid to not pick his nose, so it's okay if he picks his nose. Like, just because we've been lied to believe that it was real doesn't mean the lie isn't a lie. Like, if you're fooled into eating a bag of dirt that you're told is candy, that doesn't make the dirt candy. It's still dirt. Can't you understand that? Am I right, Doug? Just by
No, you're absolutely correct.
Voting, we're not accepting what they're doing.
The problem, Ed, is that you think that if you vote, you can change things, but you haven't read the Little Child case, and you need to read that. You need to become informed that your vote means absolutely nothing other than to put some guy on the dole, because that's all politicians are. They're failed businessmen and failed attorneys, and so they're looking to not dirty their hands and steal the money out of your wallet so that they can have a living. That's all they are.
Yes, Anita says, I believe we are sovereigns in our sovereign states. Yes, we are. And I noticed earlier somebody said we're just going to become a state for another state in America. No, we're not. Because we, the people, have the power to decide that. If you get off your fat asses and get involved.
Well, exactly. And they, just because, even the de facto government can't sign us into the United States as a 51st state. They can't, because they're it's funny. So Harper went to the UN a number of years ago to sign on to a treaty, something that the UN was doing. And he went into the UN, he was ushered in, blah, blah, blah. And they came to the room where he was supposed to go in with all the other people that were signing on to this thing. And they stopped him at the door and they said, I'm sorry, Mr. Harper, you can't come in. You're not the one that could sign the treaty on behalf of Canada. And so he knew, funny thing was, he knew he couldn't do it, but he went anyway. And so, of course, the taxpayers are paying for it, so he doesn't really care. So he turned around and walked away with his security people, and they went out for a very nice dinner and then flew home on the private jet. So it should tell you the federal authority has no authority. They are not sovereign. The land underneath the Parliament buildings that places like Washington, D.C., and the City of London in the UK, Canberra in Australia, they're all de jure governments with land under their feet. The federal authority, what we call the federal authority here in Canada, has no land under its feet. Hence, it has not any eminent domain. In other words, it's not sovereign. Without eminent domain, there's no sovereignty.
Think about it this way. Think about it this way, folks. In the United States, they had to create the District of Columbia.
Yeah, the Organic Act.
Right. What did that do? That made a small little section of the city sovereign land for the government.
Well, it's actually 10 square miles. So
yeah,
the City of London is 1 square mile, but the District of Columbia is 10 square miles.
Right. The problem is, here in Canada, our federal government doesn't even own the land that the House of Parliament sits on. They rent it from Ontario.
Well, let me read you something here I've got here. It says the UK does not own...
Doug, just to keep you up to speed, I have shared with my audience the whole Unidroit signing.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
That was done by the provinces.
document. It's like, here's international proof that the federal government can't sign documents on behalf of the provinces because the provinces are independent countries and they had to sign on individually to this international agreement called UNIDROIT.
Let me read you this very quickly.
Sure.
It says the UK does not own Canada today as it is no longer a colony. Since December 11th, 1931, the ownership of the land is held by each of the provinces. The sovereign right to govern originates in, the sovereign right to govern originates in, nor can it be divested from the ownership of land. In order that a sovereignty be exercisable by a central government in Canada, it is indispensable that the sovereign provinces divest themselves of those powers which they collectively desire the central government to administer, and to cede to the central government some land, such as, I gave example of the District of Columbia in the United States, or the District of Canberra in the Australia. So the problem that we have here in Canada with the federal authority is that they actually have no authority. It's really that simple. And once again, I come back to this, the only authority they have, Ed, is when they put a gun in your face and tell you to do something. And if you don't, boom.
Okay.
We talked earlier tonight about the Little Child case, 1988. It was done in Alberta. It stands in the courts across Canada as precedent. You can't sue the politicians if they don't live up to their promises. You're toast. So what good is it to vote? You have taxation without representation. Oh, gee whiz. Wasn't that the call in 1776?
I'm getting yelled at here from the YouTube chat room because I'm not paying attention enough to their questions over there. And they've actually been chatting quite a bit amongst themselves. John Beard has some serious issues and with what,
which are?
He's majorly impatient is what it is. He wants to see us get moving on things. This is going to take some time and some organization, John. Be patient, buddy. Sigma 6 is asking, Doug, what are your thoughts on Canada as a corporation? ? What is your interpretation? ?
Well, here's the funny thing. So we talked about the District of Columbia and the 10 square miles.
Right.
And people have come to me and go, oh, Doug, look at this. We found on, what's it called, Dun and Bradstreet. Look, here it is, Canada Incorporated. It says right here on Dun and Bradstreet that they have an address on Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's called Canada. And I've said to them, I said, well, you're going to need to understand something. Being that Canada isn't a sovereign nation and doesn't have land under their feet, their embassies can't be sovereign either. So if you go to the address, that's the Canadian embassy. That's all it is.
Yep.
And of course it's incorporated. Canada's incorporated. They can only cause control over their, it's like a multinational corporation that owns a whole bunch of other corporations. They're subsidies. They own, for example, Bayer, who now own Monsanto, they control Monsanto because they own the stock in it. Well, the same as Corporation Canada, the Government of Canada, INC, which was incorporated as a maritime incorporation in the city of London, 1982, has a domicile address in guess where? Go ahead, Duke, you tell them.
Prince Edward Island.
Correct.
That's why the document right here, right there, the second line says province, means the province of Prince Edward Island. Why is Prince Edward Island listed separately from all the other provinces? Because it is the domicile location for the Government of Canada, Inc.
Correct.
Ed, when you created your little construction company, you had to list where the offices or the corporate headquarters of that company are. What city are you domiciled in? That's what the government had to do in Prince Edward Island Gee, kind of coincidentally, right where the Charlottetown Accord took place.
And speaking of these, there was the Governor General Act 1985, the Meech Lake Accord 1987, Charlottetown Accord 1992, and then the Constitutional Reform Act of 2005. What did all of these acts try to do? Do you know?
They tried to justify and make real the government.
No, they tried to wrest control of sovereignty from the provinces.
How?
Read the acts.
But the provinces don't have sovereignty because they're not legal.
No, they still sit on sovereign ground.
Well, that's true. Yeah, Queen's Park sits on sovereign ground. The premier. Yeah.
Yep. They're using the one in British Columbia, in Victoria, British Columbia. Those parliament buildings belong to a de jure government of British Columbia, but also if you look in the United States, remember we talked about in 1878 they created everybody says, well, it was 1871. They did the District of Columbia Organic Act 1871, but people failed to read the statutes at large, and if you read the statutes at large, you'd see that the District of Columbia Act 1871 was repealed in 1874, and then a new District of Columbia Act 1878 was created.
Yep.
Okay. But they never repealed the District of Columbia Act 1803, which was the constitutional government under common law. The 1878 Act took the constitutional government to its second jurisdiction within the Constitution, which was Admiralty, maritime jurisdiction, and moved it there. They unseated the de jure government, and they reseated in the de facto government under Admiralty jurisdiction. We were doing a movie called Bamboozled, The Reseating of the Republic in the United States quite a few years ago now, which gave this entire story of how to fix the problem. So if you go to British Columbia, we seat a de jure government. Guess what? We get those parliament buildings are ours under the de jure government. The people that are in there today are there illegally.
Yep.
But they're pretending to be what they're not. And the only thing is, in Ottawa, those buildings don't sit on land owned other than the province. The province basically owns that land. So how does the province, the Canadian government, doesn't own any land?
Yeah.
But the province of Ontario owns that land. How do we know this? Because in 1965, Russell Roger Smith found at the Bank of Canada a $2.7 million rental fee paid to the Ontario government.
Cha-ching. All the information's there, folks. All you gotta do is dig it up. Everything Doug is telling you, you can go dig up and confirm it's there. That's how he knows it, because he's dug it up. And people before him have dug it up. Doug said something in one of his first interviews that I ever watched, and it's stuck with me since then. And it rings true for me as well, because I stand on Doug's shoulders, and Doug stands on the shoulders of giants. You said that once in an interview with Hugh. You said, I stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's very true. There was a gentleman he sent me Walter Kuhl's letter that got me on this road. And Eldon Warman passed away last year. He was 84 years old, and his family decided that they didn't want to pay to keep the website of DTax Canada up, regrettably, and they just pulled it down. Eldon supported that website through his very limited Canada pension check. He was not a very wealthy man. He died with basically the clothes on his back.
But he was the man that got me started. And when I refer to Shoulders of Giants, he's one of the first. Russell Rogers Smith was another. Walter Cool was another. And going through, there was a gentleman that I learned about in Ottawa called Arthur Bouchon, who actually, if you look at the Ho Canada book, he talks about doing a walkabout, trying to find the British North American Act in the archives. And he runs into a gentleman by the name of Arthur Bouchon. Well, I came across Arthur Bouchon's story long before I knew about Russell Rogers Smith. And in his story, he tells of the walkabout that he did, I'm assuming after Russell Rogers was there. He went and he did a thorough search looking in every nook and cranny in Ottawa for the British North American Act, and he never found it.
No.
Because it never belonged to Canada. It was never given to Canada, ever. It was for the provinces to ask for if they so chose to after the Statute of Westminster, and prior to that, it only belonged to the Governor General as his letters patent.
I read that today. I forget whether it was in the Statute of Westminster where I read that, or maybe it was in the Barr Smith interview. That I forget who it was that says it, but the British North America Act was given to the provinces in that
Correct.
they may form a federal entity.
It was given to them as a
the
blueprint.
Federal government. There was no federal government to give it to at that time. It was given to the provinces.
But and the only way the federal the de facto federal government could get its hands on it, right, was to steal it from the provinces. So if Trudeau went to the UK, he stole the British North American Act. It's not his property.
Yeah, it's not the federal government's property. Okay, I got to pop back over here to the YouTube chat room. Sigma6 is asking, in quotes, everyone, quotes, person, or, quote, owner, comma, and similar expressions, comma, include Her Majesty and an organization, semicolon. Doug, can you comment on this definition?
Okay, I have no idea what he's talking about, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like where is that definition from, Sigma? Where are you what documents are you drawing that from? I know that Doug has shown me documents. In fact, I just had it up here. According to the 2015, I think that Definition Act is from, Doug, if I remember your interview correctly.
Yeah, Interpretations Act 2015.
Sorry, Interpretations Act, yes, of 2015?
Yeah.
Okay. And I just had it up on the screen a few minutes ago, so I think most of you saw it. The very top clause says, quote, person, or any word or expression descriptive of a person includes a corporation. I know that it was, I think, 1931, a case in California. They were fighting to have corporate personhood declared. And 3 years later...
Stop. 1882.
Maybe it was... Okay, and then 1934, they took it and used the notes, and the judge that made the ruling didn't read into the ruling, the original ruling. He only read the judge's notes and said, "Oh, well, they decided that corporations have personhood."
Okay, let me tell you the story.
All right, you give it to us.
Are you ready?
In the unabbreviated Duke format.
Well, 1882. It's called the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railway. That was the name of the case. Okay, give me a second. I may actually have the date incorrect on this.
Okay. And
here we go.
Sigma 6 says that's from Interpretation Section, page 6 of the Criminal Code.
Okay, so here we go. Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railway, 1886.
Okay.
Okay? So the judge in that case told the lawyer, because he came in the second day, and he said to the lawyer, I'm not going to hear about corporate personhood because it's already acknowledged that corporations are persons. And you're not to argue it in my court. And so the court reporter at that time, when he wasn't a court reporter, he was working for the railway. He wrote in the head notes, not part of the decision, because it would have been, the judge would have read it in the decision if he would have included that in the decision, because it wasn't. But he wrote into the head notes that corporations were persons. And then in Massachusetts, about 3 years later, in a court in Massachusetts, the lawyer brought up that corporations were persons, and he said that the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railway made precedents of 1886, and the judge never read that case. He just said, okay, and he believed the lawyer. But the lawyer lied to him, because it wasn't part of the case, it was part of the head notes. And that's how we got corporate personhood. And the thing that you're thinking about was in 1931, the last place in the world that accepted corporate personhood was the province of Alberta.
Ah, there we go. I knew the 30s had something to do with it.
Yeah, that was the last place in the world. They still issued corporate charters that were 5 or 10 year charters, and if you were a bad person or you were a bad corporate citizen, then they could revoke your charter and seize all your property. Wouldn't that be nice to have today? Oh, wait a minute, we can put that into our Constitution when we do our Constitutional Convention. We can actually get rid of corporate personhood. Ooh, I told you we can change the world.
We can change whatever we want. It's
our
Constitution.
We can change the world, Duke. Because the minute we take corporate personhood off the table, guess what? The rest of the world has to comply.
And the minute we show other people, like the citizens of France, how we remove the corrupt regime and seat legal, we the people, authorized governments, watch what happens around the world, ladies and gentlemen. You'll see the monarchy in England vanish, because the people will realize how corrupt things are. They will assert their sovereign rights. That'll be the end of it. It'll happen. It'll start in Canada and spread around the world.
And that's the beautiful thing. We can change the world. Yeah. And take the power away from the parasites that want globalism, that want to control with a global central bank and a global fiat currency. We can take it all away from them. And that's their fear. Because there are 7.8 billion of us and only around 300,000 of them.
Okay, Sigma, I would suggest you go to themithiscanada.ca and contact Doug directly there. Your questions are really too complicated for us to get into here tonight. We're going to lose half my audience going, what the hell's he talking about? Because you're even pushing the boundaries of what I could discuss with you. Everyone, person, and owner, and similar expressions include Her Majesty and an organization. Again, you're quoting laws put in place by a criminal regime designed to protect and empower the criminal regime. But again, contact Doug at themithiscanada.ca or on Facebook. They have a page. I don't know if you have access to Facebook. Not everyone uses Facebook. I know, shocked and amazed, eh? Not everyone uses Facebook. But you can go to themithiscanada.ca, contact Doug. He'll talk to you about it. And it'll save you having to listen to me interpreting things and saying it back and forth. And it'll be much faster. Just go right to the source. He's there.
Oh, he's not on Facebook. If you want to contact me directly through the website, I am theforce at nephilimfilms.com.
The Force. May the Force be with you.
At nephilimfilms.com, yes.
All right, he says he's going to get a hold of you, Doug.
Cool.
John Beard is saying, let's not count eggs before they are hatched. I'm still waiting to know how.
Constitutional Convention.
Constitutional conventions, John. Exactly. And how do we do constitutional conventions? Come watch my show a week from tomorrow night, and we'll start talking about how we're going to do that. Here's the key, folks. In a few months' time, Doug and, well, I may be pushing him on the timeline, but let's say safely by the end of the summer, September, Doug and his people are going to be ready to provide us with the blueprint, the outline, the ways and means to implement constitutional conventions. But if we don't have the network of people organized to do that at that time, we're only going to delay the whole process. And that's what next Sunday, March 31st, is going to be all about. Getting we, the people, ready for this information that Doug and his people have coming for us, okay? We can't turn a tap on in the bathroom upstairs until we put the plumbing to the bathroom upstairs. Doug's going to supply us with the water. We got to build the plumbing.
What we're going to be doing, Duke, and I said this earlier, is that we're revamping the whole website, and we're going to be including a few pages on the website for creating constitutional committees so that people can get the information out, because people have to learn, first of all, why they need a constitutional convention and why do they need to seat a de jure government. So we're going to do that through constitutional committees in a grassroots format so that people can come and register on the site to get the information necessary for them to teach their neighbors, their family, their friends about why they need a constitutional convention. But what is a constitutional convention? How do you create one? What is a constitution? How do you create a constitution through a constitutional convention? So this information we're going to be disseminating through the website, through the pages for people who want to join and create constitutional committees and start at the grassroots level. There's no sense trying to do a constitutional convention unless you have enough people that understand A, what it is, and B, why it is.
Yeah, exactly. You need, how can I put this to you? You need, in a football team, you need an offensive coach and a defensive coach, and you need an overall coach who's going to help the offense and the defense work together as a team. Well, we need to pick and find, not necessarily pick, but find our offensive coach and help him build the offensive team, and the defensive coach and help them build the defense, and then bring them all together. That's what I'm going to start working on with you folks Sunday, March 31st. Doug and his people are busy behind the scenes putting together the information and the website and all the stuff we're going to need. But if we don't have people ready to do this, Doug's wasting his time.
Well, the other thing too, Duke, that we're asking of people, okay, is we need to make the movie, and we're going through the donation process, and we need to have people kind of help us financially with this. With the constitutional committees, we're going to set up Patreon accounts so that people can donate to help offset the cost of the committees, even though if they can't get themselves dedicate and volunteer to do these committees, at least they can, donate $5 a month. That will help offset the cost of printing, of getting the flyers out, of creating the signage, et cetera, for the committees that are being created that way.
Buying coffee for when you've got 30 people coming together at a Royal Canadian Legion, okay? That sort of thing. That's what...
Exactly. To cover the Wi-Fi.
This is the kind of stuff Doug is working on behind the scenes.
Well, and it has to, and we're still doing donations for the film itself. You can go onto the Myth is Canada, up in the upper right-hand corner on the title page. There's a clip that you can push, and it says donations, and help us make the movie. We're going to have, it probably within the next few weeks, we're going to have swag also available, caps, T-shirts, stickers. I went through this with you a couple of weeks ago when I was on. I actually put a big order in for stickers a few days ago, so we'll have that coming in. And these videos that we're producing, this series of 6 will be up on the website for download. And we will charge a small fee for that, but this way people can download them onto their phone and learn about the British North American Act, about the Statute of Westminster, about the Hudson's Bay Charter and the Rupert's Land Transfer and so forth. I'm doing a 2-part video for the Canada Act, which will include the Constitution Act and will also include the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and which I'll also get into the Meech Lake Accord, the Charlottetown Accord, et cetera, and explain why they were done. But it's going to take a little more than one video. It'll take a couple.
Right.
But they'll be available as well as in a DVD set. As you were saying, you want to, I'll send you some masters. You can go ahead and put them out that way for yourself and your listeners as well.
Oh, I don't know if you've caught my posts yesterday. I did a quick run through and added up all my DVD that I've ordered and how many I've mailed out. 432 people have contacted me since the beginning of March. I've mailed out 520 packs of DVDs with 10 DVDs in a pack. Do the math. That's over 5,000 DVDs that I've sent out in the first 22 days of March. That just blows my mind. A, that I was able to do that many DVDs sitting here burning them, okay? But B, what really just blew me away was the number of people who out of the blue emailed me and said, I got to know this. I know people who need to know this.
It's quite amazing, eh?
Oh, it's been unreal. Unreal, really. 432 people have taken 5,000 DVDs to go hand out to people. It boggles my mind at the response of knowledge-hungry Canadians. I don't know how else to describe them. They're knowledge-hungry. They're starving. They want this information big time.
Well, I know that, and as people get more and more aware of their surroundings and what's going on around them, and how that none of the authorities give a shit about them at all, and at the end of the day, you know, you're going to, the only thing that they want from you is your labor, is what's in your pocket,
your money.
They don't give a crap about you. It's just how much can they drain out of you before you've had enough.
Yeah. That's why they take 30% in income tax off your paycheck.
Well, wait till we get our own AOC up here. I mean, she's done more for the Republican Party in the United States, I think, than any other candidate since the inception. You know?
Absolutely. If she hasn't convinced more people to leave the Democrats and become Republican, I don't know what else she's done. Other than open her mouth and prove that she has no cranial capacity because it's all full of shit up there. But
well, I think Donald Trump needs to donate to her PAC so she's reelected in the next for the next election.
The Republican Party should donate to her. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. After all, she's doing a wonderful job for them.
Doug, we're pushing almost 10 to 12. We've been 3 hours on here. I want to deviate off this topic just to give everybody a little break and end the night on a totally different note. Sort of close things out.
No, I want to say one more thing, and then
Sure.
we'll
Okay.
and
You
we'll
go
do
ahead,
that.
and then I'll touch on this.
Okay. The time has long passed since Mr. Smith and Mr. Cool made their statements, and with it the ability to form a federal union. In 1982, 14 years after Mr. Smith's death, and some 40 years after the interview with Barr, Pierre Elliott Trudeau and his liberal regime decided to incorporate. To fully understand what happened on December the 12th, 1931, the Dominion of Canada ceased to exist. This means, in the simplest terms, no federal government or any federal authority of any kind. It is a complete fraud on the people to this day. The government of Canada only exists through our ignorance. Today, we, the people, must seat a de jure government in our 12 sovereign nations known as provinces and territories through the holding of lawful constitutional conventions to create constitutions and bring the power back into our hands. There you go, Duke.
Do you understand that, folks? The only way we can do this is to come together and form our own, we the people, empowered and controlled by we the people, legal de jure governments in each of the 10 independent countries that make up this big landmass we've been told is called Canada. It's the only way we can do it. And now I've forgotten what it was I wanted to bring up.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'll think of it again another time.
Well,
maybe it was over here that I saw it.
you wanted to leave on a different note.
Yes, and I forget exactly what it was.
Well, we can always leave on this note because this is a good note.
Okay.
I really appreciate you having me back on, Duke. Thank you very much.
Doug, I appreciate you coming on. If you're available hanging around with not much to do, I won't say nothing to do because you're busy writing script and getting ready to do more videos and all kinds of stuff. You're always busy. But if you've got time, excuse me, pop in and have a little peek at what's going on my CPR show tomorrow night because I've told people last night that what I want to do tomorrow is open up my Skype and my Facebook and my phone and let people call in and talk about what they've heard tonight. I know that by tomorrow, they're all going to be going, yeah, but what about... So jot your questions down because your memory's probably just as bad as mine, folks. Jot your questions down. Come and join the show tomorrow in the chat room or through Skype or through Facebook Messenger. I'll post my phone number. And Doug, if you've got time, pop into the chat room. Maybe say hi and see if you can answer some questions for people.
What time are you doing that tomorrow night?
Same as always, 9 o'clock.
See you at 9.
Okay, guy. All right. Thanks for coming on, Doug. I know we'll talk during the week. And we're
going to talk tomorrow night. I'll be there.
Okay. All right.
I'm having fun with this. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the intelligent questions tonight. It's been wonderful, wonderful again to be here, and I'm here for the people, Duke. That's what we're doing here at The Myth.
And that's what I'm doing. My audience will tell you. I repeatedly tell them it's not about me. It's about them. It's about all of us. It's about getting this message out to all of them.
I hear you, brother. Okay, good night. Good night, all.
Good night, Doug, and thank you so much. There you go, folks. Doug Force, The Myth is Canada. Let's get this. There we go. There's my ugly face up on the screen for you. I'm trying to keep up with the YouTube chat over here. William Hogan, thank you for the compliment. Was an education. It's just the start, my friend. It's just the start. Next week, a week from tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how we, the people, can start doing this. It's why I've asked specific people to be on the show next week. If you look at the list of people that I've named, there's a Canadian truther from every province. Okay? Actually, Doug keeps correcting me. There are Canadian truthers from every country across this great land. The country of Ontario, the country of British Columbia, etc., etc. I'm still getting used to the concept of referring to things as countries, because I've been as brainwashed as you are, okay? I admit that. And Doug will tell you, I make the same mistake all the time. I still refer to them as provinces, and he says to me, well, they're not provinces. Oh, I know that, but it just rolls off my tongue that way, and that's the way it, we're all the same way. We've been generationally programmed to believe this. We all sit back and talk about how our kids are being programmed to believe there's 62,000 different genders, and they're being brainwashed. Well, we are victims of that brainwashing, and I admit that I am just as much of a victim. I still, to this day, even though I know they're not provinces, I live in the country of Ontario, I still casually, without thinking about it, call it the province of Ontario. It's not. And slowly I'm trying to convince myself, train myself, to start calling it what it is. The country of Ontario. The country of Alberta. Canada ceased to exist in 1931. It's been a lie ever since. Yes, Viking says, same thing here. Hard to change the thinking. Yeah, it is. It really is. But we have to. And we have to start doing it with the people we're talking to. Every day, the people at work, the people you see at the kid at the gas station. It's one of the reasons why I've started opening my shows with that give us a place to stand, give us a place to grow song. Because really, the Canadian national anthem is false. Canada doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's hard to get that into your head, and I have to keep telling myself that. And believe me, I've been digging into Doug Force since probably October 2017. So like a year and a half now I've been digging into stuff that he's been working on. And for years, if you watched my video about Niagara-on-the-Lake, where it all began, that I posted earlier today, that's all information that I learned as a kid. Because my mother was the editor of the newspaper in the home of British parliamentary government in this country. 1792 is where I admit, out on the East Coast, I think it was Nova Scotia, New Scotland, as it was called, they were granted the right to have a legislative assembly, but they didn't have a governor general. They didn't have the full governmental structure that was put in place here in Ontario in 1792. That full governmental structure included John Graves Simcoe as the lieutenant governor, who was given a blueprint to form a government, and that blueprint included a legislative council appointed by the governor general and an elected legislative assembly of 11 members from the public. But as I said, the legislative council, the appointed members of the government, and the lieutenant governor general hold veto power. Same thing with our Governor General. Now think about this. The Governor General has veto power to control the government. But yet, Trudeau and the Prime Minister appoint and choose the person who's going to control them. Do you let your kids pick their babysitter? You might give them a choice between 1 or 2 or 3 different babysitters that you've picked out and approve of, and they get to pick one of those 3. That's kind of like us with elections and voting. We get to pick one of the 3 that the criminal regime have presented to us and said, which one of them you want to shoot you? Which one of them is going to be the head of the firing squad? You get to pick who's going to control you. You get to pick whether it's Mao Zedong or Lenin or Hitler. That's what you get to pick. You don't get to pick what they do. You just get to pick which one of them controls you. That's been our government. Anyhow, folks, it's midnight here in Ontario. I want to thank you all for spending your Saturday night with me and with Doug. I know it's not me you're coming to hear. It's my guests. And yeah, sometimes those guests are you. Because tonight, you were as much of the show as Doug was. And I can't help but say it. It's not about me. It's about all of us. And tonight's interaction with you and with Doug proves that. It's about all of us. Folks, I got to go get a bottle of water. I emptied this one. I got to get a bottle of water. It's 12:01. We've been 3 hours on here. I want to remind you, everybody, tomorrow night, I'm going to open up the chat. I'm going to open up Facebook Messenger, my Skype, in the YouTube chat room. For those of you who don't have Facebook, I understand a lot of you, nope, not going to join on Facebook. I don't care about pictures of what you had for lunch. And I agree, there's a lot of that crap on Facebook. But anyhow, for those of you who don't use Facebook, hit me up on Skype, dukewillis@gmail.com. Just go to Skype and look for Duke Willis. Tomorrow, I will post my phone number so you can call in. I'll put you on speakerphone. People can hear you. You won't be able to hear any responses from anybody that's on cam unless you're watching with your computer. But you can call in and ask me questions and that sort of thing. And we'll do our best to answer them. Okay? The screen just jumped here. Viking. No, where did it go? Viking, yes, I agree. I need a bit of a foundation, but personally, I've made up my mind. Okay. I'm just an old tundra boy who came across this a few months ago. My head is spinning. Let it spin. It'll slow down. Tomorrow, when you've had some time to sleep and think about things that you've digested tonight, during the day, if you think of something, jot it down so you don't forget, like I did, wanting to close out the night. Because I'm old. All right, folks, we're going to end things off tonight, again, with the Music Fest for Vets. I'm going to get a hold of Eric Brazeau the first of the week and see about getting some updated information on this year's festival. As soon as I've got that, I'll bring it to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for spending your night with me. I hope to see you back in here tomorrow, and I definitely want to see everybody back in a week from tomorrow on the 31st. Until then, good night, ladies and gentlemen.
around the table, drinking java by the cup. You know what? My lady wants me home, but when I sit down, I can't get up. You know what? Drink my coffee from my favorite cup. Good God. Sit down at Tim Hortons, I'll be sucking it up. Mercy. I got to make that scene, but after one cup, I gotta pee. You see, my hair's all gone, and my beard is turning gray. Mercy. All the women that I hit on, it turns their head the other way. You know, I might get me a real nice blonde if I look a little more like James Bond. Hey! Hit my band. Mercy. Make that alive.